Hello, and welcome. I am Chilling Tales. And as you get ready for bed, you must know that you are doing amazing and you deserve all the sleep you can get. So as you are winding down, let me know where you are from and what time you are watching this video. Like and subscribe to help the channel if you'd like. Now put your mind at ease and let the story unfold. Hello and welcome. I am Chilling Tales, and as you get ready for bed, you must know that you are doing amazing and you deserve all the sleep you can get. So as you are winding down, let me know where you are from and what time you are watching this video. Like and subscribe to help the channel if you'd like. Now put your mind at ease and let the story unfold. The first thing I did after the realtor handed me the keys was take a picture of the front door. It wasn't sentimental. The door was ugly, peeling green paint, a tarnished brass knocker shaped like a lion whose mane had rubbed smooth under 100 palms. But the picture mattered. I wanted proof, a before, a way to say later, when I started to doubt, this is how it looked when it belonged to me, and this is how it began. The house sat at the end of a dead-end street, under a sycamore that shed bark in long, papery curls. 4 rooms plus a narrow kitchen, the listing said, and a spacious finished basement. It had been empty for a year. The price was an apology. Come take this problem off our hands. I had a moving van coming in the morning. That evening, I had a sleeping bag, a thermos, and the stubbornness that follows you after you've convinced yourself a decision was brave. I told myself I wanted one night alone in the place to take its measure, to listen for whatever old houses say to new owners. The front door stuck halfway, then gave all at once with a sigh. The hallway smelled like dust and time. Sunlight fell in a careful slant through a high window, catching the suspended dark of the air like glitter. I set my bag down, walked room to room, and counted. Living room with a fireplace choked by a painted board, a dining room with built-in shelves, and the ghost of an oval rug, a kitchen so narrow you had to step backwards to open the oven, 1 bedroom on the ground floor, 2 upstairs, 4 rooms plus the kitchen, as promised. I took another picture of the hallway, then one of the living room. I liked the way the light found the nail heads in the floorboards and turned them to tiny eyes. It wasn't until I reached the upstairs landing that I saw the first odd thing, a door at the end of the hall that wasn't in the photos. It was newly painted white, smooth and clean, where the others were old and cracked, and the knob was cold under my hand, like it had come from a different weather. The realtor hadn't mentioned an extra closet. I opened it. Inside was a small square room with no window and a single bare bulb in the ceiling, the kind you pull with a string. I pulled it. The room held only a chair, not an antique, not a menace, just a chair with a woven seat and 3 spindles missing from the back. I stood there looking at it and felt something in my chest lean sideways, as if the floor had given a fraction. Then the bulb flickered and died. I closed the door on the dark, marked it in my head as storage, and told myself that new houses are just the same as old houses. For a little while, you don't know their moods yet. You get used to the sounds and stops, and the way a particular hinge complains like a throat that can't clear. The unfamiliar becomes furniture. By 10, the house had settled into a hum I could pretend was comfortable. I unrolled my sleeping bag in the living room and set my thermos on the hearth. I put my phone on the floor beside my head so its little light would be near me, and I lay there listening to the tick of cooling pipes, the occasional whisper of the tree shedding. At 11, I fell asleep. At some hour that didn't belong to a clock, I woke to footsteps overhead. They crossed the room above me once, twice, back and forth, the patient pacing of someone deep in thought or grief. The steps were too even to be pipes, too deliberate to be an animal. I waited for the fear to rise like a tide in my throat and drown me, Instead, I felt a kind of bleak practicality. The house had been empty. Empty places collect things: dust, stray cats, stories. You inherit all of it. I got up because not moving would have been worse. The staircase creaked under my weight, as if translating my steps into a language the house understood. On the landing, the air was colder. The door to the small white room at the end was half open, where I was sure I had closed it. I told myself wind, though no window was open. I told myself wood, moving on wood. I put my hand on the door and pushed it wider. The light had decided to work again. It fell hard and yellow from the bulb, making the corners into stacks of shadows. The chair stood where it had, pointed toward the door now. The woven seat had a dark mark on it, a stain perfectly circular, as if a wet glass had been set and lifted, only larger, like the bottom of a bucket. The footsteps came again, close enough to be in the room, and also not in it. They stopped when I stepped inside, as if I had entered a conversation at the wrong moment. "Hello?" I said, because words felt like a thing I could do that wasn't turning and running. "I just closed on the house today. If someone's squatting, if you need time to gather your things, just tell me." Silence. I pressed my fingers into the woven seat, half expecting it to be warm. It was cold. The stain wasn't wet. The air smelled like my mind went to time, then to iron. I looked up, feeling foolish, and the bulb flickered again, brighter and then dimmer, like something had breathed on it. I backed out and pulled the door shut. I went into the nearest bedroom and opened the closet. It was just a closet. I opened the next door and the next, turning knobs, finding nothing but empty space and old paint. My chest unknotted a fraction. Houses need to be lived in, I told myself. They're like animals that don't know they're loved yet. By the time I returned to my sleeping bag, my breath made small clouds in the beam of my phone. I checked the thermostat. It read 68. The house disagreed. I tucked the bag higher and closed my eyes. I woke again to the water running. It took me a moment to place the sound, a steady stream hitting a metal sink. The kitchen. I sat up too fast and saw the living room as a new thing, as if my eyes had learned a different way to see while I slept. The corners felt farther away. The windows seemed taller. I could not have explained what had changed, only that the distance between objects had lengthened in a way that made my stomach dip. I stood in the air pressed against my face, soft but persistent, like walking into a web. I walked through it to the kitchen. The faucet was on full. Water churned into the deep enamel sink, staining it a brownish tea color that vanished down the drain. I turned the tap and the water stopped, not with the complaint of old pipes, but suddenly, as if someone else had turned it off from the other side. I stood still and listened, but there was no other breath in the house. I leaned my hands on the counter, and the counter leaned back, not literally, not enough to make me stumble, but the feeling was there, as if the house had settled its weight into my palms and waited to see what I would do with it. "Okay," I said aloud. "Okay." I made tea. It was a reflex, a ritual left over from all the nights I had soothed myself with warm cups and the lie that heat solves cold things. I drank it standing in the doorway, looking down the hall at the front door with the lion's smooth mane. I watched the door until I had finished the tea. It did not move. I checked my phone. 3:12 a.m. I checked my picture of the front door. The lion looked back. I slept again at some point because dawn found me with my face pressed to the floor and a dream about a lake drying. The light through the windows was pale and tender, the kind of light that makes promises it can't keep. I gathered my bag and went to the front door and out into the morning and stood on the stoop with my eyes closed. The street was familiar in a way the house wasn't. A dog barked. A woman in a bathrobe bent to pick a newspaper off the wet grass. The sycamores sighed and let a strip of bark fall. After coffee at a diner where the waitress called me honey because she called everyone honey, I returned to the house with a new list of explanations: a faulty thermostat, a pipe with a mind of its own, a bulb that needed a better socket. I'm not a fool, but I don't like being told what I felt as a disagreement in vocabulary. I started with the white door. It was shut. Good. I opened it. The chair was there. The bulb was dead again. I reached up to tighten it and felt something soft on the string and looked. A little knot had been tied there. A simple overhand knot the way you tie a reminder around your finger. My stomach did a small private thing. I untied it. I tightened the bulb. It stayed off. I went downstairs. The moving van came. Two men in neon shirts and beat-up caps hauled my boxes and furniture and asked which rooms were which. Living room, dining room, kitchen, I said, and pointed, and they nodded, and it felt good to use those words like stakes to hold a tent in place. Where you want the bed? One asked. Upstairs, first bedroom on the right. He carried the headboard up without comment, but when I followed with a bag of sheets, I saw him standing on the landing, looking down the hall. You got a lot of doors, he said. 3 bedrooms, I said, cheerful like a brochure, and that little closet at the end. Closet, he repeated. Sure. We built the bed. We put the couch in the living room, where the light would find it easily. We leaned a mirror against the dining room wall, and it leaned back. The men left. The house and the things inside it stood still long enough for me to feel briefly proud. I had done a grown-up thing. I had made a shape in the world that was mine. At noon, I opened the basement door. In the listing photos, the basement had looked harmless. White painted walls, the gloss of new concrete, a cheerful orange water heater, like a person you could confide in if you had nothing better. The stairs were steep but sturdy. I went down holding the rail and counted my steps. 12 to the bottom. I always count stairs the first time. The basement was as pictured, which is to say it was the same room, only not. The walls were white. The concrete was new, but the proportions were wrong. The room was slightly too long for its width, like a person whose limbs have grown faster than their torso. It was not something I could measure then, only something my body knew. On the far wall was a door that had not been in the pictures. It was old wood, unpainted, with a black iron latch, the kind you might find in a cottage where an herbalist lives and makes the kind of ointments that still smell like the plant they came from. I touched the latch and it moved under my hand like a thing alive would, and I pulled the door open. A narrow hallway stretched beyond, no wider than my shoulders, with a dirt floor packed hard and the scent of damp clay. Electric light ran in a thin conduit along the ceiling. I switched it on, and a line of bulbs popped awake, one after another, stepping away from me like a path beginning to tell its own story. I stood in that doorway with my mouth open a little and said my realtor's name like a curse and a plea. Then I stepped into the hall. The air changed halfway down, as if I had crossed a threshold into somebody's breath. I felt it coat my lips, a mineral cool that made me think of cellars full of apples in childhood. The hallway ended at another door. This one was painted the same white as the little room upstairs. The knob was new. I opened it. I smelled thyme and iron and dust. I was looking into a square room with no windows and a single bare bulb in the ceiling. A chair stood in the center, with its woven seat and its 3 missing spindles. The stain on the seat had grown larger, no longer a circle, but an oval, like something had sat there heavy and patient and sweating. I closed the door and backed up until my shoulder hit the concrete wall. The light along the conduit hummed as if considering whether to stay. I turned and ran. The hallway made my shoulders itch, like it was choosing a size and might decide to choose a different one while I was inside it. I reached the basement and took the stairs 2 at a time toward the sensible, ordinary rooms, where the couch waited in the light that turned nail heads into eyes. On the landing at the top of the basement steps, I stopped, not because anything blocked me, because the air upstairs had shifted again, that same barely there pressure, and my body decided to balance itself against it before I moved forward. I counted doors upstairs until I felt calmer. Bedroom 1, bedroom 2, the little white door at the end. I opened the first bedroom. My bed looked too long for the room. I opened the second. It was smaller than I remembered, like the wall had inched inward overnight. I opened the white door because not opening it would make it important. The chair was gone. I did not go inside to check if the bulb worked. I closed the door and leaned my forehead against it and concentrated on the feeling of painted wood under skin. It felt like language. It felt like a word that would break if I held it too tightly. The first week, the house played at being ordinary. There were noises, but they fit stories I could tell. The water in the pipes sighing in the morning, the old floor complaining under my feet, a bird trapped in the chimney briefly and then gone. I ate at the counter and read in the living room and knew where my teacups were without thinking. At night I slept, and when I woke with the taste of dirt in my mouth, I blamed the basement smell for finding me in my dreams. On the seventh day, I went to make coffee and found the kitchen had gained a door. It was between the stove and the fridge, where yesterday there had been a wall hung with an ugly calendar left by the previous owner. I stood with the measuring spoon in my hand, and I said no, exactly like that, not loudly. The door was painted the same tired green as the front door, only this paint hadn't peeled. The knob was brass and dull. There was no frame. The door grew out of the wall the way a tooth grows out of gum, as integral and inevitable. I put my hand on the knob and pulled it open. Within was a pantry, shelves from floor to ceiling, the smell of cedar. The air was cooler by a few degrees, and I felt those degrees like fingers sliding under my shirt. On the middle shelf was a jar of something that might have been preserves if someone had preserved fog. It was gray and swirled almost invisibly when I held it to the light. I put it back where it had been without examining the label because my mouth had gone dry. I closed the door. I made coffee. I sat with my hands around the mug until the heat bit my palms hard enough to be something present tense. Then I opened the door again. The shelves were the same. The jar remained where I had put it. On the lowest shelf, however, was a pair of boots I did not own. They were muddied like they had recently walked through a river that remembered being a road. I knelt without touching them and read the brand stamped inside the collar. It meant nothing to me. I closed the door, and the knob clicked like a throat swallowing. The house added a door to the dining room a day later. This one was a pocket door that slid instead of swung, hidden in the wall between two built-in bookcases. When I opened it, I saw a long, narrow room lined with mirrors on both sides. The mirrors were tired silver, not new, and they showed me not as I was standing, but in the act of turning to open the door, caught in endless variations of a single moment. I slid the door shut and put my shoulder against it, as if someone on the other side might try to remove me. That afternoon, the mail came with a circular addressed to resident. I brought it inside and set it on the table and found a new door in the living room where I had leaned the mirror. I moved the mirror and opened the new door and found a staircase I had never seen before, leading up into a darkness that didn't belong to any of my rooms. I closed it and dragged the couch in front of it, telling myself this was ridiculous and also necessary. I tried to call the realtor. The call went to voicemail. I left a message that began, "I have a few questions," and ended with, "Call me back as soon as you can." I sat with the phone in my lap and watched the hallway. The green front door was steady and sure. The lion's mane did not change. I took a picture of it, then another of the kitchen, where the new pantry stood. In the photo, the pantry door wasn't visible, only the calendar, ugly and benign. I took other pictures. They showed what the house had shown when it wanted to be bought. I could have left. I told myself that several times. I said aloud, "I can leave," and listened to how the house held that sentence without argument. And yet was the feel of the floor under my feet. The way the air seemed to fit around my limbs like a shirt to the right size. I had wanted a home. I had found one. It was simply larger than I had anticipated in ways that were not reliably in one direction. The night after the pantry arrived, the footsteps returned. They did not pace this time. They moved from room to room with a confidence that was almost welcome, as if the house were walking itself to test its joints. I lay in my bed and tried to imagine what this would look like if it were a map. Small lines drawn between doorways, looped paths, a geometry of motion. The steps paused by the white door at the end of the hall. I heard the knob turn. I did not hear the door open. The steps continued to the stairs and went down. "Are you looking for something?" I said into the dark. The question surprised me. It didn't feel like something I'd thought up. It felt like a reply in a conversation I hadn't meant to have. A second later, someone knocked. It came from the basement. 3 soft knocks, a pause, 3 more. I counted 12 steps from my bed to the hall, 14 to the top of the staircase, 12 down to the basement. The knocks were patient. They made a rhythm that wanted to be learned. I switched on the basement light and went down. The door to the narrow hallway stood closed. I put my ear to it and heard nothing. The knocks came again, not from that door, but from the far corner where the water heater hummed. I stepped closer. They stopped. I reached out and touched the orange metal like a consoling shoulder. There was a hiss, quiet but certain, from behind me. I turned in time to see the white door open. The bulb inside flared to life. No flicker, no negotiation. The chair had returned. It faced me squarely, and on the seat was a folded piece of paper with my name written on it in block letters, the way a teacher writes a child's name on the first day to make sure she spelled it right. I picked it up. The paper was warm. Inside, in that same careful hand, was one sentence: "You are doing beautifully." I stood in the doorway holding that sentence and felt the kind of exhausted gratitude that has nothing to do with reason. I closed my eyes and might have leaned into the doorframe. When I opened them, the paper was blank. I left the door open and sat on the chair. It would have been an absurd act anywhere else. Here it felt like accepting a gift. The woven seat held me gently, and the room breathed a little. The bulb made a halo noise. I stayed until my eyes felt heavy again, and then I went back upstairs like a person who knows where she lives. I slept. I dreamt of a hallway that extended itself like a hand. I woke with dirt under my nails and the taste of time in my mouth. The next morning, I found a new door in the upstairs bathroom. It was small, no higher than my shoulder, set low in the wall behind the tub. It had no knob, only a little hole where you might insert a key. I tried a hairpin, and the hairpin bent. I put my ear against it and heard water, not the rush of a pipe, but the slow lap of a lake against a shore made of tiles. I crouched there on the bathroom floor with my head bent and thought about calling someone to come look, a contractor, a priest. The idea of both made me tired. I went downstairs to make tea and found the pantry door standing open. On the middle shelf where the fog jar had been was a loaf of bread wrapped in brown paper. On top of the paper was another note, the same block letters, "For when you're brave enough to be hungry." I unwrapped it. The bread was warm. I tore off a piece and ate it, and it tasted like someone had learned my mouth and taken mercy. "Who are you?" I asked the pantry. The pantry said nothing. The house said nothing. The air pressed against my face like a kiss. This is where stories like this do a certain expected thing. They offer a rule. Don't open doors you haven't seen before. Don't take gifts from rooms that are not rooms. Don't eat food from a pantry that wasn't there yesterday. But rules only make sense when you can imagine obeying them. I had begun to understand that the house wasn't asking me to obey. It was asking me to participate. On the ninth night, a storm came. Rain slit the darkness and stitched it together again. The sycamore rubbed its fingers together and left damp bark on the steps. The footsteps were busier during storms, as if the house was restless when the sky made its own noise. I sat up reading because sleep felt like something the house could swallow too easily. At 1:30, the power went out. The quiet that followed had a pressure to it, not silence but weight, like a hand set between your shoulder blades to suggest you move. I lit a candle. The flame made a small world around itself where nothing else quite belonged. In that world, I decided to go into the basement. The 12 steps down were deeper in the dark than I had known. The candle made their edges jump out and then slide away. At the bottom, the orange water heater was a kinder thing than a person, holding its heat without boasting. The white door stood open. The room was lit, though no bulb could have been on. The chair had shifted to the corner. In the center of the floor where the chair had been was a stain in the exact shape of a sitting person, darker at the edges where thighs and forearms might have been. The stain breathed very faintly. In that light, the paper with my name on it lay on the floor, blank side up. I knelt and turned it over. A new sentence had appeared, written in a quicker hand. He will try the old way. I waited without standing. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know what the old way could be beyond a phrase that made my teeth ache. The house above me made a sound like settling. The rain doubled down and then paused to listen to itself. I heard it then, the front door opening, not in sound, which was rain and hinges, but in a subtle subtraction. The house's breath shifted, as if a nose had taken in air at a different angle. I stood and blew out the candle. Darkness was in agreement now. I counted the stairs up with my hand on the rail and felt each stair answer back. On the landing, the storm made the windows into screens for a flickering film. I moved toward the front hall, and something moved toward me from the dining room. We stopped at the same moment, and the air in the space between us pitched, like a chord mistuned by a human hand. When I stepped into the hall, the front door was ajar. The lion's mane was wet. There were footprints on the mat, bare, wide at the toes, the kind of print made by someone who walks without apology. The prints led into the house, and then ended in the place where a new door had appeared in the living room. The couch no longer blocked it. The door stood open to the staircase beyond, steps leading up to an up that wasn't my upstairs. The old way, I thought. A man coming in through the honest entrance, a staircase that was not in any plan. "Hello?" I said. The word looked strange in that hall, like a foreigner wearing a local hat. He stepped into view at the top of the new staircase. He was taller than I expected, and smaller. He had the kind of face that would be unremarkable in daylight, but in the shadow it was all intent and bone. His hair lay flat to his head, like something had pressed it into obedience. He did not smile. He didn't need to. He was not here to reassure. "I've been waiting," he said, though the voice came from the walls and the floor, as if he had taught the house to say it for him. "You made yourself easy to find." I thought of the door pictures on my phone that no longer showed the doors. I thought of the notes written in careful block letters and in the quick hand. I wondered which were his and which belonged to the house and which to the other presents that had left bread and tied knots. "I live here," I said. "If you need something, you should leave." He took one step down. The staircase did not creak for him. He took another. The old way, I thought again, not because I knew it, but because it felt in my bones like a rhyme you learn before you understand its words. "I help with the rooms," he said. "People get lost without someone to keep the line straight." "Do you want help?" I said, because it felt like the shape of the conversation he knew how to have. "Or a witness?" He stopped on the second to last step and tilted his head, and in that motion I saw nothing human, not wrong, just other, the way a bird regards something before deciding that air will hold it again. A keeper, he said. We all keep. You, me, the house. It's a balance. When someone new comes, the house tests. Sometimes it chooses. Sometimes it eats. The stairs behind him were not stairs just then. The space turned inside itself so that the steps looked like teeth. I blinked to smooth them back into a climb. And which am I asked, though my mouth knew it did not want to hear him say it. He smiled, small and bland and satisfied, and that was when the other door opened. It was the pantry. It swung itself out of the wall without my hand. The smell of cedar and something warmer reached the hall like a promise. From the pantry, steps, not feet on wood, but the sound steps make when the person making them has taught the sound to be careful. A woman stepped into view, not young, not old, her hair pulled back in a way that made her forehead look like a thoughtful space. Her wrists bore thin silvered scars. Her eyes were the color wood is under bark before air makes it brown. Not tonight, she said to the man on the stair. He did not turn fully to look at her. He looked the way people look at a shadow that behaves. The rain made a drum of the roof. You always were practical, he said. It was a line from a play he had performed often. She stepped farther into the hall, and the air made room around her. Her hands were empty but not harmless. She glanced at me long enough to tell me I existed. You need to choose, she said, and her voice had the careful calm of someone who is both patient and unwilling to waste time. Not whether to stay. That's done. Whether to keep a door open when it wants to close. This is my house, I said, and even as I said I heard the house correct me gently, not unkindly. Ours. The man on the stairs moved again, one step, and the hall narrowed around him, not visually, not like a trick, but in a way that made the space feel full of him. He lifted his hand, and the air bent as if drawn on paper. He will try the old way, the girl handwriting had warned. I understood suddenly. The old way is to make you step backward into a room you don't recognize, because a man has put his body between you and the space you know. I stepped forward. I expected resistance from the air, or from him, or from the house. Instead, the house hummed and shifted and laid its weight under my foot like a dog. The woman moved with me, not in front, not behind, but aligned, a hinge that turned without noise. The man hesitated. For a creature that had learned the house, hesitation was a visible wound. His face did not change, his hands did not rise, but the stairs under his feet chose to be stairs, and that meant he was subject to gravity again. Not tonight, the woman repeated, and I felt the sentence in my teeth as a shape, a notch a key fits. I put my hand on the banister. It was slick with rain that had no path to it, and yet had found a way. I don't know your rules, I said, but I have mine. He opened his mouth as if to say something he'd set aside, like a spoon at the edge of a plate. The pantry door slammed, the living room door with the staircase that wasn't anything closed, with the soft finality of a book. The white door at the end of the upstairs hall chuckled once and went silent. The man blinked. That was his mistake. The house took blinking as surrender. The stair under his foot shifted a fraction, not in a direction you could map. He reached for the banister and his hand closed on air. He was there, and a fraction to the left of there. The fraction widened. Every house has certain privileges. Mine exercised one. He did not fall. He simply was somewhere else in the house, somewhere the rooms keep for things they haven't decided about. The hall exhaled. The woman let out a breath she had not appeared to be keeping. She looked at me. A small, tired smile adjusted the bones of her face. Bread, she said. I laughed, and the laugh felt like a door opening that had not been shut. We went to the kitchen. The pantry had filled itself with the smell of warm crust. She tore the loaf neatly in half. We sat on the floor and ate with our fingers like people who had already used the plates for some other purpose. The storm softened. The house unlearned a tension I hadn't known it had carried. Who are you? I asked, when the bread was only crumbs traced on our thumbs. Someone who chose wrong once, she said, and then learned how to keep the house from choosing for me. Does it choose? I asked, or do we tell it how? Yes, she said, and that was the kind of answer I had braced myself against and also wanted. We sat. Somewhere overhead, a door I had not seen yet closed itself with great care, as if not to wake us. The clock on the stove blinked its emptiness after the power loss. The woman watched it, and then looked at me the way you look at someone when they have arrived at the moment you were waiting to meet them in. Rooms breed rooms, she said. Attention breeds attention. If you look for a space, the house will give it a name. If you refuse a door, the house will find another frame for it. I don't want this to be a lesson, I said. I want to know where my bed is when I go upstairs. You'll find it, she said, if you tell the house what you need and if you mean it. And the old way? I asked. Men who think the house is a thing you win by walking harder, she said. But sometimes the house is tired of being kept that way, and it loves a woman who will sit in a chair and eat bread and say no in a voice that knows her own name. We stood. The kitchen door had something new to it that I couldn't see yet. I could only sense the square of its presence in the wall, like a page under thin paper. The woman glanced toward the basement and shook her head once. A mother to a child the house had been. Keep the white door closed until you need it, she said. And when someone knocks from the water heater, answer with 3 knocks back. Not 2, not 4. What happens if I do 4? I asked, to see if rules might be specifics and not poetry. Then you'll know more, she said. And sometimes knowing is a door too. She walked to the pantry, and the pantry changed around her, made itself a hallway where shelves had been. She stepped inside and paused and looked back at me as if she had forgotten something on purpose. Old trails keep old promises, she said. Choose the new paths, the ones cut by hands you know. I don't know yours, I said. Not even your name. You do, she said. You're already saying it. She closed the pantry door between us. When I opened it, the shelves were shelves again, and the bread had grown another heel to replace the one we had eaten. The house slept the rest of the night, as if tired of its own theater. In the morning, sunlight found the floors like a friend. I went up to my bedroom and found it the right size again. The hall held the right number of doors. The white door at the end sat benign as a question. The mirror in the dining room reflected my face and also the door behind me, even if the pictures on my phone would later show only wall. I live here still. The pantry sometimes gives me jars of fog, which I don't open. The basement knocks when the storms are hard, and I answer 3 times and feel the house shiver with pleasure and then settle like a cat. The man finds his way into rooms from time to time. He stands at the edge of them and waits to be let in like a principal. Sometimes the house admits him because we are all part of the same story, and sometimes it keeps him in a stare that doesn't decide to be anything. When he comes, I sit in the white room and read aloud. The light there is the kind that makes paper look carved, and the chair is exactly the chair my back wants when my hands are tired from holding books. The stain on the seat has dried into the shape of a map I am learning to redraw in my sleep. Rations will looking unachieved. Still are more doors now. The house trusts me with them. I open some and not others. Sometimes I wake with dirt on my nails and the taste of time. Sometimes I find a hairpin bent into a shape I didn't know it could hold. Sometimes I see a note in quick handwriting on the floor beside the bed. The last one said, "You are doing beautifully. Keep going." Last week a door appeared in my closet at the back where the coats think they are alone. It was small and set low, with no knob, like the one behind the tub. Only this one had a key hanging from a string. I put the key in the lock and didn't turn it. I sat on the floor and leaned my head against the wood and listened. The sound on the other side was not water or wind or footfalls. It was breath, mine and not mine. The house and not the house. the sound of something alive choosing to remain so. I haven't opened it yet. Not because I am afraid, though I am, because doors need to be more than opened. They need to be understood, and I have learned that understanding is not the same as knowing. The old way would be to push. I have time to find the new way. Sometimes at night, when the lights are out and the house has chosen its size, I walk the rooms and count the doors softly. 1. I put my palm against the white paint, against the green, against the brass knob, the same temperature as my hand. The air presses my face, and I press back. We take each other's measure, like partners learning how to dance without stepping on toes. At the edge of sleep, I think I feel the house lean toward me, just a fraction, while it learns my name. And on good nights, when the wind threads the alley just right, the pantry breathes out the smell of warm bread, and I hear a gentle knock from the water heater, and I answer 3 times, and the house answers back. Now, on to the next story. The first time I noticed the highway was wrong, the mile markers started counting backward. I hadn't meant to be driving that late. I don't like night roads. They feel like hallways. I didn't agree to walk, but I'd stayed too long at the office, and the freeway that usually sang me home had been closed, a lit marquee promising a detour that would save me 20 minutes. The detour took me past warehouses sleeping with their bays open like mouths, then onto a ramp I didn't recognize. A green sign with white letters promised a town whose name I had never heard, and because the font looked like every other font on every other sign, I trusted it. For a while the road was ordinary. Headlights followed me in the distance like polite ghosts. The shoulder was clean and graveled. The radio found a station, and then another, voice giving way to song, giving way to voice again. Ordinary human sounds wrapped in static like a blanket with thin places. When the numbers started to misbehave, I almost didn't see it. Mile 134, then mile 133, then, because I blinked and rubbed my eyes, mile 132.5, which wasn't a thing the state bothered to mark. I laughed out loud, the way you do when a chair wobbles under you and then doesn't. When I drove by mile 134 again, I turned the radio off. I told myself I had looped without noticing. It was a cloverleaf somewhere, a long lazy curve that fed me back to where I'd been. I told myself there would be a sign for the freeway again if I stayed patient. I checked my phone to see how lost I truly was. No bars, a blank map, a clock face that jittered between 10:13 and 10:12, as if it couldn't decide which minute it wanted to belong to. The road ahead unwound, featureless, the kind of asphalt that had forgot it had once been rock. The shoulder was rutted now. The lines felt more like suggestions than law. I slowed because speed seemed like vanity in a place that had lost count of itself. I saw the glow of the rest area before I saw the building, a gentle, wrong yellow that made the darkness look bruised. The sign said, in all caps sincerity, "Welcome travelers." It did not name a county or a department of transportation. It did not say next facility 48 miles. It just welcomed. Everything in me wanted to keep driving. Everything in me that kept me alive. When I was a small child holding my mother's hand in crowded places, told me to look for the exit and take it. But my eyes were grainy and my hands had started to ache where they bent around the steering wheel, and the idea of a bathroom you can lock and water that isn't from a bottle felt like grace. The parking lot held 3 cars and a truck with a tarp over something that could have been wood or could have been anything. The cars weren't new, but they weren't old either, makes and models that blur together when you stop paying attention to years. I pulled into the slot nearest the walkway. I turned the engine off and sat with my hands still hooked to the wheel because letting go felt like letting something in. The building had the shape all rest areas have, low, broad, practical, the roofline of a public promise. The The glass doors whooshed open as if they knew me. The tiled floor carried the smell of cheap cleaner that tastes like lemons only because you know it's supposed to. A vending machine hummed. A bulletin board held notices printed in fonts that had come with the software. One flyer announced a lost dog, a golden retriever smiling a human smile. Another advertised a harvest festival in a town whose name sounded like an apology. The person behind the information desk was mending a map with clear tape. They were middle-aged and gendered, mostly by the pronouns other people would have used, not by anything they chose for themselves. Their vest was navy, and their name tag said attendant. When they saw me, their face practiced a kind of warmth that looked real enough to sleep under. Long drive, they asked. Feels like it, I said. Where am I? Their smile widened a fraction, not amusement, but gratitude for the honest question. Between places, they said gently. Sometimes the road stretches. You're fine. Bathrooms are on the left, coffee on the right. There's a machine that claims to make tea. The urge to ask which freeway I'd left and how to get back to my regular life was strong and foolish, like asking a storm not to rain. I nodded instead. Try to stay an hour at least, they added, tape tearing as they flipped the map and pressed. It helps. It helps what? I asked. Your eyes remember far better than your mind, they said. They need time to forget how far they've been asked to see. It sounded like nonsense and felt like truth. I went to the bathroom because bathrooms are a kind of sanity. The tiled echo, the familiar signs promising hot water and soap, the mirror's flat argument that you have a face and it belongs to you. These things hold. I washed my hands longer than I needed to. The water ran too hot, then too cold, the way public water always chooses a mood and then chooses another to prove it's alive. When I came out, the room had new occupants. A woman sat at a table with a toddler who was pretending their juice box was a boat. An older man leaned against the wall, reading a newspaper with a headline about a team that had never existed. A teenager drifted near the vending machines, a small comet with no orbit. Hoodie up, gaze restless in the way of someone who has decided if they stop moving, someone will call them home. I made coffee. It tasted like coffee made by machines that don't like to be the only warm thing in a cold room. I took it to a table and sat and pretended to scroll my phone. The screen stayed blank. A minute hand on the wall clock climbed and descended the same space 3 times, like a swimmer practicing without a pool. The attendant finished mending the map and hung it on the bulletin board. It was a map of highways, as expected, with bright veins leaping state to state. Where my finger traced the road I thought I had been on, the paper felt thicker, as if layers had been pressed there. See, the attendant said from beside me, as if I had said something. You're not off the path. The path is just longer here. Here, I said, and the word felt heavier than it should. How far to the freeway? Farther if you rush, they said. Closer if you rest. They pointed to the clock. It helps if you let the place keep your time for a bit. I sat in that room with those strangers and my coffee, and a rested weariness came over me, the kind that doesn't demand bed, only mercy. I watched the mother show her toddler how to fold the straw wrapper into a caterpillar. I watched the teenager finally choose a snack and eat it slowly, as if grateful for a task. I watched the older man's eyes move back and forth across lines about a game nobody had played. After a while, the attendant set a small basket in the center of the room, filled with little wrapped paper mints, the old-fashioned kind that taste like chalk but make stubborn throats agree to swallow. Take one when you go, they said. A sweet on your tongue tells the road you know who you are. I wasn't lost, I said, though maybe I had been pretending it louder than usual. They tilted their head. Their smile was not unkind. Everyone who comes here is tired, they said. That's a kind of lostness, nothing to be ashamed of. I wanted to put my forehead on the table like a child. Instead, I stood and walked the room. Because movement makes ownership, and I needed to own something. The bulletin board had more notices than it had before. A hand-lettered card in blue ink. Have you seen me? Beneath a small photo of a teen whose smile showed a chipped tooth. A crisp sheet with a border of maple leaves. Community potluck. Bring what your garden gives. A printed page with clipped sentences. If the lights flicker, do not wave back. There was no phone number. There was no organization. The page had been thumbtacked through at each corner, a double row of brass tacks, as if someone had been very sure. The attendant watched me read. People pin advice on their way through, they said. It keeps the place honest. What happens if you wave back? I asked because my brain likes rule breaking only in theory. Depends who's doing the waving, they said. Some things here are kind, some are just old, the toddler announced. Boat, with the certainty of a deity. The mother smiled, without moving her eyes from the child's face. The older man folded his newspaper with reverent care. The teenager who now that I knew to look I realized was a girl with hair tucked into the hood and silver-painted nails, approached the desk. Phone's dead, she said to the attendant. Yours got a cord? My mom's gonna kill me. Cords for us, the attendant said, but you can leave a message. They gestured to a ledger on the counter, the kind you sign at funerals or in lobbies that think they're historic. The girl picked up the pen in a grip that said she wrote mostly on screens and awkwardly printed. Mallory, tell Mom I'm at a rest. Stop past where the river used to be. I'm fine. Don't drive. Her handwriting drifted uphill. She dotted the I in her name with a heart she half finished, like she thought better of letting anyone see softness. You'll get home, the attendant said. We'll see to it. Mallory chewed her lip. I wasn't going home, she said to the countertop, but okay. The room exhaled. Something in me did too. I'd been traveling long before this detour. I realized with the quiet kind of anger you can direct only at yourself. The miles had been piling up under my life like an unbalanced stack of plates. How long is an hour here? I asked. As long as you need it to be, the attendant said. Their eyes were kind, the way a lake is kind when it doesn't lie about being deep. We stayed. The clock's minute hand did not always move forward, but it moved. People came in, a man with a long-haul look, who stretched his fingers before going to the coffee machine. A woman in a windbreaker with a university logo who asked if any of the vending machines had real food and then bought 2 Snickers bars and a bottle of milk. A couple who were fighting quietly, the way people who love each other practice so it won't break anything vital. Nobody asked for help loudly. The attendant offered it like cups of water to runners. When the lights flickered, no one waved. I went outside once to stand under the indifferent sky. It was not cloudy, but the stars were not there. The parking lot lights hummed a note that had been chosen and then forgotten. My car looked smaller than it had when I drove in, as if it had found out who I was and adjusted its expectations downward. The truck with the tarp had rearranged its burden into a shape that might have been less wood and more the idea of cautions. The air smelled like wet pavement without rain. Out by the picnic tables, a payphone stood where payphones should no longer be. The receiver hung straight. The cord did not knot. I lifted it and held it to my ear because muscle memory is its own religion. A tone sounded, long and low, not a dial tone, not an alarm. Then someone on the other end breathed in, and I found myself saying, I'm okay, before I knew I meant to. Good, said a voice that belonged to a person who was older than the person they sounded like. Stay where you are, we'll meet you. Who? I asked. Us, the voice said. You and me, and the person you haven't decided to be yet. The line clicked and gave me nothing else. I hung up and stood with my hand on the metal and thought I might cry, but it passed the way storms go around the place they mean to end up soaking. When I went back in, Mallory was sitting at my table. She looked up with the indifference of someone waiting to be told she was in trouble. "You look like you have snacks," she said. "Do you?" I did. The bag of almonds I kept in the glove compartment for days when meetings ran long. I handed the bag to her. She ate too, delicate and exact, the way rich people eat on television when they think no one will notice they don't like food. Then she pushed the bag back. "I left," she said, "on purpose. My mom says everything twice so it sounds true, and then it never is." She pulled her sleeves over her hands. "I didn't mean to end up here." "Me neither," I said. "Roads do that. They make promises they don't know how to keep in the daylight." She thought about that and nodded once, solemn as someone agreeing to a surgery. "The bathroom is nice," she said. "I don't like bathrooms in public places, but this one is nice." "I know," I said. "It's the locks. If someone knocked on the mirror," she said, as if testing me, "what would you do?" "I'd tell them I was busy," I said, "and I'd mean it." That got a ghost of a smile. She slid the almonds back to me and stood. "I'm going to take a mint," she said. "Take two," the attendant called without looking up from their busy hands. "Take three. Sweets are cheap here." Time slowed obediently. It wasn't boring. It was a relief, like discovering the pool is warmer than you feared. I read the bulletin board again and found notices I hadn't seen. A sketch of a bird with a note beneath. "If you see this, feed it salt. It will tell you which lane to choose." A typed page with a torn corner. "If you have to sleep in your car, put the seat back all the way and your hands on your stomach. You will remember who you are when you wake." A square of lined paper. "Leave the pine cones, they're not for us." I took a mint from the basket and slipped it in my pocket. It weighed almost nothing. When I finally felt ready, there wasn't a signal, only a slackening in my shoulders, and the sense that if I kept sitting, I'd grow moss. The attendant nodded once, the way a teacher dismisses a class quietly so as not to break the spell. "High beams when you go," they said, "no matter what flashes back." "Won't that blind people?" I asked, because this was the ordinary world poking up in a place that only pretended to be part of it. "There aren't people about right now," they said, "just you and what wants to be the road." That would have scared me an hour ago. Now it felt like a good rule among many. I went to the door. The toddler waved at me, and I deliberately did not wave back. The older man tipped his newspaper like a hat. Mallory looked at her shoes, and then at me and said too softly for anyone else to hear, "Wish me luck." "Not luck," I said, "bread." I didn't know why I said it. It felt correct. Her face relaxed as if I had told a joke she understood. Outside, the air was the same air, which was its own relief. My car accepted me without comment. The engine turned over like a throat clearing. I put the mint on my tongue. It tasted like sugar and nothing, and then a third thing that felt like a hand uncurling. I pulled out of the lot and onto the darker road, brights on. The highway ahead was deeper, not darker, deeper, like a line drawn with a pen pressed harder. The stripes glowed like bones under skin. The shoulder was clean again. I drove the speed limit because I am a person who likes contracts between strangers to stand. At the edge of my beams, sometimes something gleamed. Faces, I thought at first, but then not faces, or not like mine. Shines, maybe, the way eyes shine in a field when you sweep a light. They didn't move toward me, they moved with me, interested the way deer are interested in the idea of you, rather than you. At mile 132, there was a shape in the road that looked like a mattress, until it didn't. I changed lanes. It changed lanes. I didn't. I drove through the not mattress and felt nothing, and felt everything. A soft static through the skin, like walking through someone else's sorrow. I kept the wheel steady. My high beams cut the dark without apology. A sign flickered past. White on green, letters struggling, and then aligning themselves at the last second. City Center, it said. And then, as if remembering, west. Exit 5. 5 felt like a small number. Small numbers are kind when you've been counting backward. The next sign was clearer, the next clearer still. The radio found a song I knew, and then a voice that said the name of a host I had listened to for years without noticing. My phone found one bar, and then three. I considered crying again. I did not. The freeway opened to my right, like a door I had been avoiding, because I told myself it belonged to other people. I took the ramp. I merged with the clean confidence of someone who has remembered a password. The stars were back because the sky had agreed to be sky again. The sign for my exit appeared exactly where it always is. I drove home. The lot behind my building smelled faintly of last summer's trash and wet cardboard. The stairwell felt like a friend's hallway. My apartment had left the light above the stove on the way I always do. My couch was unashamed of being a couch. I took the mince wrapper out of my pocket and smoothed it with both thumbs. The paper was plain white, no logo, no brand. When I unfolded it, I found one line written in blue ink that looked like it belonged to a pen kept for signing forms. "You're doing beautifully." I laughed even as I sat down hard, as if my legs had decided to be honest. I slept with my clothes on and woke at 4 with the certain sense that someone had set a blanket over me and a cup of water on the table within reach. In the morning, the detour sign at the end of my street was gone. The radio had moved on to other songs. Mallory's name sat in the back of my mouth like a seed. I went to work and sent emails and sat in meetings and looked out the window at the slice of sky my office owns. That evening, I drove to the freeway exit where the detour had begun. The ramp that had been closed was open again. The sign promising the town with the apology name had been replaced with one I recognized and had known all along. I could have let it be a strange dream I was too tired to argue myself out of. I could have folded it into a story about stress and highways and minds that get hungry without asking permission. Instead, I bought a roll of mints at the corner store and kept them in my glove compartment. I started bringing snacks to work that looked like food rather than bargaining chips. I taught myself to keep the seat back when I napped in my car, hands palms down on my stomach, and when I woke, I remembered my name easily. Sometimes, when the road forgets itself and the signs crowd their letters, or the mile markers count in ways that feel like someone else chose the numbers, I see a yellow glow that is not from any gas station I could name. I don't always stop. I don't always need to. But when I do, the attendant is there, mending maps that have learned the habit of tearing where we press them too often. The toddler is older now. The mother's hair has the gray honesty that looks like the opposite of giving up. The older man reads a different paper with scores from games I half remember. Mallory once sent a postcard with no picture, just blue ink. Not luck, bread. Okay, the bulletin board always has a new rule, and always the old one. If the lights flicker, do not wave back. I wave at the attendant because some waves are for the living. I take a mint when I go. I keep the brights on. I talk when the payphone breathes. Between places is still a place, and sometimes it is exactly where you have to be to remember how to get home. Now, on to the next story. The day after the footprints appeared outside my apartment door, the super left a note about a leak in the ceiling below me and asked if I'd left a tap running. I hadn't. I checked the bathroom anyway. The shower head beaded with condensation, though no one had used it. A ring of moisture circled the drain like a mouth, deciding whether to speak. When I crouched to listen, the pipes hummed a pitch so low I felt it in my teeth. It wasn't language, it was intention. I turned on the faucet and let the water run, then off again, as if participating would give me authority. The sound under the floor moved away, down the line, toward the building's old boiler, where heat met desire and made fog. I packed a bag with things that felt sane, granola bars, a change of clothes, road snacks that taste like salt and grit, and told myself I could visit the lake in daylight to prove it would be ordinary in the sun. When I locked my door, the wet footprints were gone, but a damp stripe led down the hall, as if someone had dragged a finger along the carpet fibers, all the way to the elevator. The doors opened before I pressed the button. The car smelled faintly of coins and fish. On the ground floor, the superintendent squinted at me from behind stacked boxes of air filters, mouth holding a toothpick like it might bite through it. "You hear the gurgling last night?" he asked. "Complaints from 3 floors. Happens when the city does work on the mains." I nodded, as if a civic explanation could settle the thing inside my chest that had ached since the lake touched my skin. Outside, the day was clean, winter low sun sliding between buildings like a promise. I drove. Highways in daylight are kinder to the mind. They lay out their logic like a puzzle with corner pieces already found. I told myself I would see a drained bed, mud cracked like old paint, reeds frozen upright, a sign with regulations and excuses. I told myself the moon had made tricks and the hour had been late. The county line passed beneath the tires the way a threshold creaks under careful feet. The exit appeared, a smaller sign now, dented, half swallowed by brush, arrow pointing toward a road that looked like it had remembered a better time. The cracked lot waited with its crooked lamp off duty. I parked where I had before. A faint crescent of damp on the asphalt matched a tire arc as if the night had left a wet memory. When I walked past the rusted picnic tables, the air shifted cooler, as if stepping under a sheet hung to dry. The sign was the same: danger, unsafe ice, water levels unpredictable. No swimming, no mention of draining now. An older sign maybe, revealed by wind, or the same sign always, showing me only the words it wished. The lake lay quiet and silver, thin skin of ice near the shore like a cataract. Farther out, the surface was black glass. The scent of it reached me, warmth and iron, like old pennies sucked as a child. I crouched without thinking and touched the edge, cold this time. My fingers went numb quickly, the honest way winter does it. For a moment I believed that was enough to make the night a misunderstanding, and then the ice sang. It was the pop song tone lakes make in deep freeze, the drawn-out warbling, the whale song of stress moving through a sheet thicker than it looks. But under that, something else, almost hidden, a recognition of my skin. The sound traveled up my bones like a message passed hand to hand. "We've kept your outline," it said without words. "You fit." A gull lifted from a stump and scolded the sky for being too still. Across the water, on the opposite bank, a figure stood. Blue jacket, knit hat. Ordinary as a park goer, which made it wrong because no one parked on that side. The road was gone there, swallowed by saplings and the thrown fences of long neglect. The figure lifted an arm and held it out, palm up, the way a person offers a coin to show they'll be fair. I did not wave. The figure lowered their hand, polite. A different invitation, then, attention that does not demand. I turned away before the parts of me that like to be asked began to answer. There had been a town under this lake once. I remembered that, not from anything I'd studied, but from a tour guide on a boat when I was small. A man with a hat that knew weather, and a voice that had learned lake facts the way men learn their children's schedules. The dam had drowned 5 streets and a church, he'd said. In dry summers, steeple tips poked through like teeth. Drained years ago, the sign had said. So where was the town now? I walked the perimeter, or the part the brush allowed. The path was a series of trampled cheats, footprints old and new, frozen into a chronology of caution. On one muddy stretch, my boot found a print larger than mine, human, bare, not new. The edges had slumped, softened by thaw and freeze, but the depth was wrong. Something heavier had stood there than a person should be. The print was a bowl that wanted to hold water and might have recently. I crouched and held my hand above it. The air inside the shape was warmer. My palm tingled the way it does above a candle flame, snuffed. "We," said the feeling, waiting. "For what?" I said aloud, and the trees answered in their dry winter voice, nothing but the friction of bark against shallow wind. I found the old boat rental shack by its foundation, a rectangle of cinder blocks with a half-fallen wall where signatures had been carved in the wet long ago. Gus 1978, Alma plus Raf. The question mark was the joke of a hand too shy to name. On the concrete lip, a pile of debris the color of lake greens and browns and blacks sorted itself into rope, then reeds, then a frayed towel that became a snake in my periphery. When I looked straight at it, it was towel again. In the dirt under the lip, glass. I brushed it clean with my gloved fingers. A jar, cloudy with the throats of summers trapped in it. Inside, something pale and thin. A label remained on one side. Water blurred. Lost found. Written in block letters that looked serious because they had been written carefully by someone trying to be. I unscrewed the metal lid. A smell rose. Wet pennies. Time. The memory of thunder. The thing inside floated up and touched the surface, and did not break it. A ribbon of onion skin. A page. It pressed against the inner glass exactly where my eye was, as if to look back, not paper. Practiced light. The lake had given someone a piece of its surface to keep in a jar, and that someone had left it here like an offering, or a warning, or an exchange they'd decided against. I closed the lid and put the jar back. I did not have a pocket big enough for it. I did not have a house brave enough. At the parking lot, a new car sat beside mine, wet around the wheel wells, engine ticking hot metal to cold. The driver stood with their hands in their pockets, and their breath making a veil I could nearly see through. Blue jacket, knit hat. Up close she was my age, or older, face scrubbed in a way that made her look both tireless and tired. Her cheeks were pink from the lake's idea of warmth. The hat was navy and had a small tassel that tried to be jaunty and failed. Her jacket was the kind municipal employees wear because they will be outside regardless. "You came back," she said, and there was no triumph in it, only the careful relief of a person who has counted on someone else doing the reasonable thing despite reason. "I tried not to," I said. "I thought if I looked in daylight it would be less." "It lies better in daylight," she said, "but it lies simple. At night it lies in chorus." She offered her hand like a normal person. I did not take it. The lake had taught me a week ago how quickly a gesture could become a hinge. She did not mind. "Ruth," she said, "I keep the place some. Keep it from forgetting itself entirely," she said, "and keep the county from remembering too much." She tilted her head toward the sign. "We change the words when we have to. Draining is theory, level is story, unpredictable is nearest the truth. You work for—" I started, and she smiled. "Whoever will answer the phone when it rings," she said. "The state, the town, nobody. Names don't stick here like they should." We stood not touching like people who had agreed to pause something. "You went in," she said finally. Not a question. My skin remembered heat under cold. "Just to my chest," I said, as if admitting the depth would keep its size. "It touched you," she said. "It keeps that. It learns the shape of your breath." I almost laughed because breath doesn't have shape, but my ribs ached as if someone had measured them with a band of warm cloth. "I heard voices," I said. "It sounded like they knew me." "It knows how to say your name," she said. "It says everyone's. Sometimes it says the names we've forgotten to answer to. That's when people go in on purpose." "What is it?" Ruth tried 2 or 3 answers silently and settled on none. "Water with memory," she said finally. "A town with lungs, a promise kept too long. It's old, and it's tired of only being old. It wants new mouths to speak it." The wind lifted at the edge of the lot and set the cattails to whispering. Between us, the space felt denser for a moment, like the air had thickened with attention. I looked at Ruth's wrists because it felt safer than her face. Thin scars looped them, silver and old, the braided kind skin makes when it had to learn to stay. She followed my look and did not cover them. It keeps what it can, she said. It held me once. Now I hold the shore. A gull landed on the lamppost and turned its head side to side like a bored guard. The lake went on being lake, which is to say, pretending to be simple. Come see the gate, Ruth said. If you're going to keep from drowning, knowing where the bottom leaks helps. We walked along a path cut by someone with authority and then allowed to be reclaimed until authority had become a rumor. The dam wall lay low and utilitarian, poured concrete smoothed by winters, its edges lined with the sort of fence that means well but has accepted failure. In the center, a squat building with a door painted red a long time ago and now the exact color of dried blood under a fingernail. Ruth took a key from her pocket that looked like it belonged to a padlock on a barn in a story. It fit, and the door opened with the resignation of a hinge that had decided to admit it was alive. Inside, metal stairs vibrated gently, humming to themselves. The air was warmer, wet, a smell like copper coins chewed to softness. We descended into concrete belly. At the bottom, a walkway, and below that the gate, a vertical grid that held water back or did not, depending on the lever's patience. The lake pressed behind it, dark and heavy, glittering where light got in. It looked like an animal sleeping. Ruth touched the rail the way you do when visiting someone in a hospital. We're not supposed to open it, she said. We open when the county tells us and close when the county asks, and we say nothing about what we hear while we do it. Which is names, she said, and sometimes knocking from the dry side. That's the old town, it remembers too. Doors have a way of finding water. I pressed my palm to the rail. The hum deepened under my hand, then steadied. From the other side of the gate, 3 slow taps answered my pressure. I told myself machinery. I told myself the boom of my own blood thrown back. Ruth didn't correct me. It's thinner right now, she said. Winter holds the surface together, but underneath it's moving. Thinner, between what it is and what it's remembering, she said. It tries to make the remembering into the being. We stand here and ask it to wait. She looked at me with a face that had practiced hope until it fit. It helped that you left last week. Shame pricked me, nettle fine, because I fed it, because you survived, she said. It likes endings. It gets greedy when it finishes a story. How do you stop it? She laughed softly and shook her head. We don't. We teach it different ways to hunger. We give it names we don't mind it saying. We make it practice listening. She reached into her other pocket and took out a small paper packet, the kind restaurants give with salt inside. She tore it and poured a thin trail along the rail. The metal hummed like a cat. Salt, she said. Old hat. Folk stuff. But salt tells water that it has edges. She handed me a packet. I poured my portion, and the hum changed. A little less insistence, a little more agreement. Bread works too, she said. So do true stories told aloud. We read to it. We make it polite. And if it isn't, then it takes, she said. It drags the names it has learned back down and keeps them like pennies in a jar. It likes children. They put their faces close to the surface to see themselves, and it tells them a better reflection. She didn't look at me when she said that. Her jaw clenched once, released. We were smarter then, about what we built on, she added, or we were stupider, depending. We drowned a town and asked the water to forget. Water hates to be told to forget. It remembers like a prayer. We climbed back into cold daylight that tasted cleaner by virtue of being mean. Ruth locked the door. Her fingers moved deftly, in a way that said she had learned not to fumble when the lock wanted to argue. You can leave, she said, not as permission. If you drive now, you might make it across the county line without it noticing. You might go home to pipes that sing quieter. Or, or you can help, she said simply. It chose you anyway. Might as well put that to work. Chose me? It touched you and didn't take you, she said. That's a choice. The rest is whether you answer. I thought of the jar under the shack foundation, the paper that wasn't paper pressing itself to glass like a mirror's kidney. I thought of the footprints in the hall and the wet ghost of a tire curve that matched the arc of my indecision. I had been living tired for a long time. The lake had a way of making that tiredness feel like something sacred, if I wasn't careful. What do I have to do? I asked. Ruth smiled. Not wide, not bright, but real. Listen when it talks. Don't give your name if you can help it. Give it other names to say. Teach it stories with endings that let people keep walking away. And when it knocks through a pipe, answer the right number, which is 3, she said. 2 is an argument. 4 is an invitation. 3 is a boundary. She looked past me toward the water, as if checking that it had not leaned closer while we were distracted. And eat before you go near it. Hunger is a door. We worked that afternoon like people who had decided their hands still mattered. Ruth showed me how to tie flags to branches so the wind would memorize a shape and the lake would have to account for it when it reached out. We walked the shore and placed small piles of stones at intervals, 3 and 3 and 3, little stubborn altars to edges. At sunset, the ice sang again, lower, a groan that made the hair on my arms rise even through my jacket. From the center of the lake, a bubble of darker dark rose and rippled the surface. I smelled time. It's thinking, Ruth said. It does that around dusk, decides whether to spend the night telling itself a different truth. And if it does, we make it busy, she said. We set it to remembering the people who built the dam. We say their names wrong on purpose, so it has to correct us in its head. That keeps it from calling anybody else. We stood side by side and watched the moon climb into the reflector the lake offered. Across the black glass, lights blinked where no houses were. Ruth didn't look at them. Those, she said, aren't for us. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 1 bar suddenly. A message from a number I didn't know, with no content, just a gray bubble like a mouth thinking. I put the phone away. The cold bit into my socks the way honest dogs do when they want you to pay attention to something else. Go home, Ruth said. Sleep with the tub dry. Put a glass upside down over the drain. If you hear it ask you to take the glass off, tell it you're busy. Mean it. Will you be here? She nodded. Until I'm not. I started, and she shook her head. Don't finish questions in front of it, she said. It likes to answer before you're done asking. I drove back with the heat on high and my hands loose on the wheel. The highway was sincere, and I appreciated it, even the parts where it forgot to smooth. In my apartment, I did as told. Glass over the tub drain, another over the sink, a bowl turned upside down over the shower. The place looked silly in a way that made me feel like a person. At 2 a.m, a knock came from the pipe behind the radiator, 3 slow, spaced like a teaching. I knocked back 3 with my knuckles. The radiator sighed like a house cat who had agreed for now to share. At 3, water whispered in the toilet tank, a long inhale that did not exhale. I pressed my palm against the lid and hummed the note the lake had hummed in the gatehouse, just enough to show I had learned. It subsided. My dreams were a mix of concrete stairs and flooded streets seen from below. I woke with the taste of metal and time and bread in my mouth as if I had chewed all 3 and none. Days fell into a pattern made of listening. I answered knocks. I ignored whispers. I learned to say out loud the names of men who built the dam and died without getting their due. Carter, I guessed, and Rob, and maybe Thomas, while washing dishes or putting on my shoes so the house would carry the sound down into its bones and the lake would keep busy correcting me. I visited Ruth and learned to hang ribbons that told wind which way to go. She taught me to bring salt and to drop it like a signature at the waterline. She taught me to never walk the shore clockwise. If I'd started counter, the lake kept count and liked imbalance. On the 5th day, we found a child's sandal in the reeds. It was new enough to make my throat close. Ruth's jaw tightened. We walked the lake twice the long way. We found no second sandal, no parent calling a name, only the print of something large and bare that ended at the water and did not begin anywhere else. Sometimes it finds what it's owed, Ruth said, and her voice was not the calm voice she had offered the first day. Sometimes it decides itself what's owed. We teach it otherwise, or we drown. At night, when sleep came slow, I thought of the jar under the shack, the piece of lake carried in glass. The idea of keeping a square of its surface where I could watch it and it could watch me was a terrible comfort. The thing in me that wants to be chosen wanted it on my windowsill. I did not go back for it. I put a slice of bread on my counter each evening and threw it away in the morning, hard as rock and smelling faintly of rosemary. The house seemed to like the gesture. The pipes spoke quieter. The radiator knocked less often. On the 7th night, footsteps in the hall outside my apartment. Bare, wet, they paused at my door, then moved on, then returned, and paused again, asking without asking. I stood in the kitchen with my hand on the bread and said to no one, to the lake, to the part of me that listens too hard, no. The word felt like a door in my mouth. It swung and latched and held. Water licked the inside of the glass over the sink, a soft sound like a tongue learning a tooth. Not tonight, I added, and if it was someone else's line first, it fitted mine now. The next morning Ruth called, a number I hadn't given her but wasn't surprised she possessed. Gatehouse, she said. It's busy. I drove without thinking of work. The red door was open. Inside, the hum had shifted up a note that made my shoulders climb toward my ears. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, the gate wore a film, a sort of skin that bulged and thinned with each beat of pressure. Behind it, faces like white flowers pressed against a greenhouse pane from the other side. Not people, not plants, something that had learned the idea of faces and wanted to practice. The 3 slow knocks came from the dry side again. They sounded patient, polite, the way a neighbor asks to borrow sugar when they already have a cup of it in their hand. Ruth stood with her palms on the rail and her eyes closed, speaking under her breath. I caught a word or two: salt, hold, left, names I hadn't learned yet. The film thinned where the faces pressed. The gate's bolts groaned. The lever beside us quivered, wanting to release. It's asking, I said. It's telling, Ruth said, not opening her eyes. Tell it back. I put both hands flat on the rail and felt the hum answer my blood. My brain wanted to give it my name, the way you give a child a toy to distract. Instead, I offered it false ones, string of syllables that tasted like summer nicknames and teacher roll calls, and the sound of my mother saying my full name, only when the world was ending and when it wasn't. I said the names of streets from the town it had drowned, guessing, offering each like a coin. North, Maple, Church, Mill. The hum thickened, then evened, not calmer but less certain. Behind the gate, the faces blinked out one by one, like lights in a house where someone has been careful before leaving. The film thinned, the lever settled. Ruth opened her eyes. Good, she said quietly. We will owe something for that, but not tonight. What do we owe? She lifted one shoulder, half a shrug, half a brace against a blow. The work, she said. Bread, salt, attention. Stories that end with doors that open outward. We stood and listened to the water. Remember how to be only water. The hum shifted down. The names I had offered felt stale in my mouth now, like bread that had done its job and could be thrown away. When I left the gatehouse, the sky had turned the thin blue of a day that will freeze harder after dark. The lake lay still as a painting. On the opposite bank, a figure in a blue jacket lifted a hand. Not Ruth, someone taller, familiar in the way repetition makes anything familiar. I did not wave back. The figure held the hand up anyway, palm out, waiting. I turned and walked the other way around the lake, counter to everything, counting my steps by threes and saying no when the cattails tried to say my name. That night I slept with the glass over the drain and a slice of bread on the counter. At 3 the radiator knocked 3 times, and I answered with 3, and the house, pleased, settled around me the way a dog heaves a sigh and lets sleep be sleep. Outside my window, down on the street, wet footprints appeared in a trail that led nowhere and then dried. The pipes sang, quietly, and in their song, not words but the shape of them, I heard it again. You are doing beautifully. Keep going. And because sometimes kindness is as dangerous as hunger, I turned the glass on the sink so the mouth of it faced down, firm, and the water whispered nothing at all. Now, on to the next story. The farmhouse was not abandoned, though everyone in town swore it had been. I knew because the lights were on. Not steady, not electric, but a kind of soft golden flicker that made the upstairs windows look like eyes half shut in thought. I'd taken the back road because the main one was under repair, and the detour curved me past fields gone fallow and fences leaning away from their duty. I might not have noticed the house at all if the porch light hadn't swung once, slow and deliberate, as if it had seen me and wanted me to see it. The stories about the place were old enough to be furniture in people's mouths. Kids dared each other to walk the drive and touch the door. Grown men spat when they passed the property line and said things about bad soil and ground that wouldn't keep seed. No one talked about who had lived there, only that no one stayed. But the light in the window made me slow, made me curious, made me turn down the gravel drive with a crunch that felt too loud. The house had the bones of something proud once. 2 stories, gabled roof, the frame square, and ambitious. Now the siding was tired, the porch boards warped, but the glass in the windows was clean, and that flickering light inside moved like it was alive. I parked beneath an oak whose branches leaned low, as if eavesdropping, and got out. The air smelled like turned earth, sharp and damp, though the nearest field was bare. The front steps creaked when I put my weight on them, and the door opened before I touched it. A woman stood there, middle-aged, hair tied back, apron dusted with flour, as if she'd stepped away from kneading dough. Her face was ordinary in the way of people who have lived long in one place, creased, careful, eyes that saw more than they offered. "You're late," she said, and stepped aside to let me in. The words stuck in my throat. I had none to give, but my body moved because the warmth spilling from inside was better than the damp cold clinging to me. The kitchen smelled of bread and wood smoke. The table was set for 2. She gestured, and I sat, my hands uncertain in my lap. "The roads don't bring many now," she said, setting a loaf on the table, crust dark and perfect. "But when they do, it means the house remembered." "Remembered what?" I asked. She looked at me, and her eyes had the shine of water finding its level. "That it is hungry." She sliced the bread. The knife made no sound, as if the loaf were softer than air. She placed a piece on my plate, and though I wanted to refuse, the smell pulled at me until my hand moved on its own. The bite was warm, sweet, almost unbearably good. My chest ached the way it does when memory sneaks up on you. "What is this place?" I managed. She smiled, small and knowing. "It keeps, that's all. Some houses keep warmth, some keep secrets. This one keeps who comes inside." She slid the other plate toward the empty chair opposite me. For a long moment, nothing filled it. Then the chair creaked, and a weight settled. The bread on that plate tore itself into smaller pieces, crumbs scattering as if eaten by invisible fingers. I stared, breath shallow. "Don't be rude," the woman said. "It notices." I forced myself to lower my eyes, to chew, to pretend there was nothing strange about sharing a meal with what couldn't be seen. But from the corner of my sight, the air rippled like heat above asphalt, a shimmer that hinted at shoulders, at a face turned toward me. A whisper brushed my ear, not words, but the shape of my name. I swallowed hard. "How long have you lived here?" I asked, clinging to conversation like a rope. "As long as it allows," she said simply. "It feeds, it waits, it tells me when to set another place." She looked at me the way a doctor looks before bad news. "And it's been waiting for you." The bread in my mouth turned to ash. The air thickened. The chair across from me scraped closer, though no hand touched it. Something unseen leaned nearer. The whisper came again, clearer now. My name, spoken with the softness of someone who had practiced it many times in the dark. The woman folded her hands. "You can leave," she said. "But if you do, it will follow. Houses are promises. Some promises don't let go." I stood dizzy. The unseen weight stood too. My chair tipped backward and landed without sound. At the door, the woman's voice followed me, even and calm. "If it knocks, don't answer. If it asks, don't agree. But if it calls your name," she let the sentence hang. Behind me, the porch light flickered once, slow and deliberate, like a signal that had always known its destination. I ran to my car. The gravel spat under my tires as I tore back toward the road. In the rearview mirror, the farmhouse windows glowed like eyes watching me leave. And over the engine's roar, beneath the sound of my own breath, I heard it again, soft, patient, certain, the whisper of my name, following. I didn't sleep that night. Even after I'd left the farmhouse behind, the whisper of my name hung in the car like steam that wouldn't clear. Back in my apartment, I set my keys on the counter and stood with my palms pressed flat to the cool laminate, as if the kitchen could steady the room inside my skull. The city was its usual midnight self, sirens far off, a neighbor's television faint through the wall, the elevator cables taking a breath and letting it out. But all I could hear was that soft, practiced voice, trying the shape of me. I showered because water makes rules of its own. I ate toast because bread is an argument against being carried off. I put a glass upside down over the drain and another over the tub and told myself out loud that I would not be answering doors in the dark. Around 4, I fell asleep on the couch and woke with the taste of flour on my tongue and the certainty that far away, in a kitchen that smelled like kindling, a second place had been set and was cooling. The town pretended not to know the farmhouse, but people who pretend are the absolute best at offering warnings without admitting they're doing it. The cashier at the gas station said, "Old place up the county road? Storm took that porch years ago," and her eyes flickered just left of mine. A man at the diner told me to try the blueberry pie and added, "Drive careful after sundown. Coyotes run the ditches," like coyotes had learned to climb steps and stand politely at doors. When I asked directions by name, no one answered. When I said the big place with the oak, everybody knew. I waited until late afternoon, because daylight sobers even the mind that knows better, then drove the detour again. The gravel knew my tires. The oak had shed more limbs since I'd been there, bark pale as bone where storms had bitten. The porch light was off in the sun, but the windows upstairs held a warmth that wasn't sunlight, a pulsing amber like the swallowed glow of embers behind a stove door. I told myself I would not go in. I walked to the bottom step and waited. The door opened anyway. She stood there in the same flour-dusted apron, hair pulled back, face quiet, with the kind of patience that wears people thin or makes them holy. "You came earlier than most," she said. "That's good. It gets hungry if it has to wait." "What is it?" I asked, "besides a house?" She stepped aside and did not answer, and because the afternoon had the washed-out color of a calm before something decides to be a storm, because bread is harder to refuse when the air smells like whatever remembers harvests, because hearing my name from something not there had been worse than hearing it from anything at all, I went inside. The kitchen was warmer than the day. The stove clicked and sighed. A kettle heaved a small breath and held it, like someone practicing not to interrupt. The table was set for three now. The empty chair scraped itself a fraction away from the table, and then back again. Shy or coy or neither, only exact. "Sit," she said, and I did. Bread followed. Soup followed, pale and thick as if the pot had kept a recipe and a memory on the same flame. I ate, because the body has obligations to itself that terror doesn't cancel. The empty place ate too, the spoon lifting and lowering, the bowl thinning toward emptiness, with a patience that felt like tricks learned by air. I tried not to stare, and did anyway. At the edge of my sight, the shimmer made itself shoulders, and then made itself a face, and then decided I didn't deserve that much. "What's your name?" I asked the woman, because names contain edges, and I needed some, even borrowed. She hesitated so slightly, I might have missed it if I hadn't been willing to make every blink a map. "May," she said. The syllable fit her like hands fit a bowl you've used every day for years. "Was it always May?" She smiled without smiling. "It is now. Mine is," I began, and she raised a flowered palm, gentle as a stop sign pasted onto a cloud. "Don't give it," she said. "Not in here. Not when it's listening." The chair across from me pulsed at the word "it." The spoon paused mid-air, a drop hanging from the bowl of it like a bead of glass, deciding whether to fall back in love. "You said the house keeps who comes inside," I managed. "What does it do with them?" May folded the napkin in front of her into a smaller square and then smaller again until the cloth became a hard little idea. "It doesn't do," she said. "It holds. Some places are wells, some are mirrors. This one is a pocket. It keeps people the way old coats keep the warmth of the last person who wore them. Most of the time it lets go when it's done, remembering. Most. Sometimes it decides remembering isn't enough." The kettle sighed. The air over the table changed, the way a room changes when someone stands just behind you, and the chair that had been empty moved a fraction to make room for another. A fourth place not yet set. "Do you see it?" I asked, low, because speaking loudly while something listens hard feels like shouting into a sleeping ear. "Or only the result?" "I learned to see enough," she said. "It's kinder not to see at all." She poured tea that had not been there a moment ago. The cup in the empty place steamed too. "It likes bread. It likes names. It likes people who don't finish their sentences. And it likes me," I said, because saying it made it less like a hand at my back and more like a line on a page I could point to. "It knows your outline," May said, "and it knows you have a habit of coming when called." The front door knocked. Not a hand on wood that would have been a courtesy. It was a knock that came from the walls themselves, the house tapping its own bones together in a little rhythm. 3. A pause. 2. May didn't move, didn't turn her head, only went still in the way reeds go still when the fish underneath remembers it can make the water behave. "That's for me," she said. "You don't answer that one. What happens if I do? You'll owe it an answer. It will collect. Come." She stood, and I followed with the soft clatter of the empty chair sliding back of its own accord, as if it too were coming along. We stopped in the hall. The wallpaper had a faded ivy pattern that went up the stairs and then continued across the ceiling in a direction ivy never chooses. The knocking changed. 3, 3, 1. May knocked back twice, fast, knuckles on the newel post, and the house answered nothing at all, which was its way of agreeing. "Numbers matter here," she said, as if beginning a lesson I had asked for. 3 opens without letting in. 4 begs. 2 argues. One is a dare you never want to win. Who keeps count? It does, she said, and so do I, and so will you, if you plan to keep your skin attached to your thoughts. She led me upstairs. The light changed on the landing, the way you feel pressure change when an elevator slows, as if the house had its own weather. The doors to the rooms were old enough to have been measured by a careful carpenter who believed right angles were a kind of prayer. May opened the first, and then the second. The third she left shut. Bedrooms, she said, harmless enough if you make the bed yourself. They'll make it for you if you let them, and then the bed belongs to the house, not you. The fourth door was a bathroom with a clawfoot tub the color of old milk. In the tub, the faint sheen of not water, and the smell of lilacs from a soap that had not been used except by memory. May turned the tap on and off without letting more than a thin thread run, as if reminding the plumbing what quiet was. The fifth door was at the end of the hall. It was painted the same color as the hallway, and set so flush you'd miss it if you didn't know how to read the outline of a promise. May put her ear to it, closed her eyes, and then opened them again as if she had decided to spend the rest of her hearing elsewhere. Not that one, she said. Not until we have to. What's behind it? The part of the house that's most house, she said, and the part that's least. The empty air beside us shifted like a person clearing their throat. I felt breath on my cheek that wasn't mine. The whisper came, my name almost but not quite, the vowel a fraction too long, the consonant soft where it should have been a click. I said, without looking, no, and the breath withdrew an inch, affronted, and then returned, curious, the same way the tide returns because it has nowhere else to be. You'll be safer downstairs, May said. It behaves better near the stove. In the kitchen again, she cut another slice of bread and set it at the empty place, and then moved it, small and precise, to the place beside mine. It will keep asking, she said. It's patient. It has nothing but time. If you want to leave, you need to say goodbye like you mean it. To you? To the house, she said. It likes manners. If you leave rudely, it will follow until it's satisfied you know better. I stood to thank her, because I had been taught to thank people who feed me, and the chair at my side stood too. In the blank space it made, I saw, not outright, not like a face thrown on a wall by a lantern, but enough, the shape of shoulders bent the way people who have been let down too many times hold themselves when they insist they're fine. I leaned in without meaning to, because being made of nerve endings is a problem I have always had, and the shape leaned in too, aware as cats are aware when a person refuses to admit they want to touch. The whisper came again, my name more accurate now, and I felt an answering core in me loosen, as if that sound could unbutton my own bones. Outside, May said softly, and the word cut the cord. The knot body drew back. The house creaked its complaint across the beams. I exhaled like I'd been held under a shallow depth and told to name what color the surface was. We stepped onto the porch into a dusk thick enough to taste. The oak's branches lifted in a breath that did not move the grass. The field beyond the fence wore a darker sleeve, as if the earth had decided to pull itself up against the cold. Tell it you're leaving, May said. Then go. Don't answer if it whispers, and it will. Don't turn your head if it stands where you can see the corner of it. Don't speak in questions. I faced the house. The windows blinked once, slow, the way a lizard's eye licks itself. I'm leaving now, I said, careful. Thank you for the bread. The porch light swung once, a nod or a warning or a yes. I took a step, and the boards lengthened under my foot so that one step became a half step, and then the stair did the same, sloping to make my weight hesitate. I put my hand on the rail and pressed down until the wood agreed to be wood. You are not mine, I thought at it, and it seemed to sigh and let me go. At the car, I fumbled my keys because my hands had been taught to be useful and were suddenly tired of being hands. In the mirror, the front door stood open as if in surprise at my rudeness. Something stood inside the threshold, not a person, not an absence, a thickness like weather. The voice reached me through the open air, through the engine that had just decided to believe it could start. My name, perfect this time, spoken like a lullaby, taught to a machine that didn't want to sing it, and then learned to love the sound. I shut the door and drove. The drive wasn't long enough to outrun anything that knows how to stand in a doorway and wait. I took corners too sharp and stopped at a light that stayed red for longer than the night deserved. At home, my hallway smelled faintly, impossibly, of wood smoke and warm flour. The glass over the sink had fogged inside. On the counter sat a slice of bread on a plate that wasn't mine. Someone had dusted the surface with sugar that drew the shape of a leaf that did not grow anywhere near here. I stood perfectly still until everything in me that wanted to be comforted finished asking and went to bed empty-handed. 3 knocks came from the wall at 1 in the morning. 1, 1, 1. Slow, spaced, the way a neighbor might knock if they didn't want to wake a baby. I did not answer. The radiator rattled with the temper of a caged thing. Water circled the mouth of the glass over the drain and did not decide anything. At 3, sleep took me like a hand cupping the back of my skull. I dreamed of rooms that folded back into themselves and a staircase you could never reach the bottom of because the bottom kept kindly stepping away. In the morning there was flour on the threshold. I swept it up and dumped it in the trash, and it smelled like the inside of the farmhouse kitchen when the oven door opened. I went to work because pretending to be normal is a skill learned at cost. I watched the day burn itself down behind the building, across the street. I drove the long way home and did not look for the detour. That night, the knocks came again, 2, then 2, and I remembered May's lesson. 2 argues, so I did not argue. I read out loud instead, a cookbook I had kept because the person who gave it to me once kissed the inside of my wrist. The house, my house, not the farmhouse, settled around the sound, pleased as if it had been asked to do something it remembered how to do. Day after, I woke with the certainty that the beds in the farmhouse had been made and unmade without anyone sleeping in them, just to practice. Something in me turned over and decided. I went back, dusk again, because dusk belongs to houses the way dawn belongs to fields. The porch light swung and stilled. May opened the door before I could lift my hand, and for the first time she looked tired, as if something had been heavy and she had agreed to carry it farther than she had been told she had to. "It's worse when it's bored," she said without hello. "It's been thinking about you all day." I didn't give it my name. I said, "It has more than that," she answered. "It has your pauses, it has your gait, it has the way you put your hand on a rail when a stair decides to be a little longer. It loves the little things. Those are the handles. In the kitchen, the table was set for 4. The 4th place was a child's place. Small plate, little spoon. The air stung my eyes before I knew why. "No," May said sharply, as if to the house or me or both. The little place unset itself, the spoon sliding soundlessly back into a drawer, the way a guilt hides itself when company comes. "You don't get that," she said to the room. "Not tonight." The house creaked a complaint. The kettle lifted without hands and moved itself a fraction to the left on the stove, as if to say it could do what it wanted, which is the lie houses tell when they think no one who remembers their foundations is watching. "What does it want from me?" I asked. "Company," May said. "Agreement. To hear itself call your name until the sound belongs to it." "And what do you want from me?" May's mouth moved in a way that wasn't quite a smile. "Help keeping it polite. We fed it stories." That's how she put it. "We'll feed it stories until it's full enough to let you go home without dragging its tongue along your hallway." She set a book on the table, a ledger, thick and cracked, filled with handwriting so neat it might have been scribed by someone practicing penmanship to pass a test that would decide their life. Names, dates, recipes for small rituals, instructions that read like receipts. Salt the sill, 3 knocks for hello, and 3 for goodbye. Don't let it finish a rhyme. We took turns reading aloud. When my breath ran thin, May's voice took over, a low, sure sound that made even the stove stand still to listen. The empty chair leaned in, the walls relaxed their shoulders. Above us, the ceiling sighed the way a tired person does when someone else takes the next shift. Somewhere past midnight, the house tried again. The front door, no hand, no wind, opened, then closed, then opened, the latch catching and releasing with the serial stubbornness of a child who knows an adult will eventually come see what they need. Not tonight, May said without looking up. The door stopped. I read the line that told how to make the bed badly on purpose so the house wouldn't think you'd left forever. May read the one about how to tie a ribbon on the banister so the stairs would remember which direction is down. Between us, we wove a net out of sentences and stretched it across the room. Around 3, the house grew truly quiet. The kind of quiet that is not waiting to pounce. The kind that happens after a storm, looks around and decides it has said its piece. May closed the ledger and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "You can go," she said. "You'll be all right until morning. But after that, it will remember you again. It doesn't forget what it decides to keep. How do people stop it? Some leave their houses messy enough that this one gets bored," she said. "Some make a life loud enough. Some never take the detour. And you?" Her eyes went to the ceiling. "I stay," she said. "I tell it stories. I bake bread. I make sure the empty places eat so they don't make room for bigger hungers." "Who feeds you?" For the first time, she looked embarrassed. "It does," she said. "That's the bargain I made too young." I drove home under a sky that had given up on deciding whether it would rain and instead settled for that thin wet that sticks to the air. I slept with my shoes by the door. Morning came like forgiveness. Afternoon brought a knocking from the wall, 331, and I realized it wasn't the farmhouse. Not this time. The sound was inside my building, the neighbor, the next door, an echo of someone else's bad bargain. I pressed my ear to the plaster and listened for breath. Soft, sure, practiced. Someone saying a name, the way a house learns to say it. I thought of the child's place set without permission. I thought of the ledger and the sentences that held the shape of nets. I knocked back once, no rhythm, just a human hello, and a woman's voice on the other side laughed under her breath. The kind of laugh people use when they're trying not to break. "You hear it too?" she asked. "Sometimes," I said through the wall. "Try 3 knocks if it asks. Try bread. Try saying no like you mean it. What if it says my name?" "Tell it you're busy," I said, and realized I believed in the usefulness of that more than prayer. The week turned. I brought salt to my kitchen and left it in a dish because I liked the way it made the room feel edged. I swept flour from my threshold every morning, and when there wasn't flour, I swept anyway. The house on the detour did not give up. It knocked in my dream of a train that never stops. It set a second place in the kitchen of my mind, and waited. Twice, I woke with the taste of sugar on my tongue. Twice I spit into the sink and told the drain no. On a Thursday that felt like the inside of a storm's mouth, I went back and found the oak split from the last wind, its heartwood wet and bright as a fresh wound. The porch light swung without breeze. May met me outside with her sleeves rolled and her eyes too tired for patience. "It's asking for you," she said. "If I don't let it talk, it'll make up a reason to be angry. If I do, maybe we can make it forget to finish what it starts." "What do I do?" "Stand in the hall," she said. "Don't step off the runner. If anything says your name perfectly, say thank you and nothing else. If you hear yourself from upstairs, don't go. That one's a trick it loves. If it offers you bread, eat from the heel, not the middle." "Why? The middle remembers fingers," she said, and led me inside. The hall runner had a faded pattern of vines that echoed the ivy wallpaper. The vines climbed and then decided to twine backward, a loop at every threshold. I placed my feet inside those loops and thought of nets again, of ropes, of stories built out of sentences that bind. The air thickened in the middle of the hallway where the staircase rose. A shape arranged itself on the second step like a person sitting to tie their shoe. My name came out of it, utterly mine, said in the voice of someone I used to love and someone I never met, and the part of me that wants to be told where to stand. Thank you, I said, and May's hand tightened on my forearm once. Approval or warning or both. The shape tilted its head, the way hunters tilt their heads when the deer steps into the clearing. Upstairs, my voice called my name, a perfect mimicry of me at 8, me at 20, me yesterday. Thank you, I said again, and the upstairs laughed once, then turned into the sound of water in a tub being drawn for a body that has decided it deserves to be warm. At the far end of the hallway, the nearly invisible door breathed. You could see it in the paint, a pulse, a swallow. The runner's vines made a knot right in front of it, as if the person who chose the pattern had known where the house's throat lived. No, May said, and the door stilled. The kitchen stretched and shortened around us like bread rising and falling in a hurry. The table slid an inch and back the other way. The empty place set itself and unset itself, petulant, eager. The house spoke my name one more time, then tried a second word, a word I recognized and didn't. Not quite a please, not quite a stay, something older than both. Thank you, I said, and the house finally sighed in a way that was almost human annoyance. My legs shook afterward. May put a slice of the heel in my hand, and I ate like someone who had been running, because in a way I had. We sat with our backs against the stove door and let the warm leak into our spines. How long will it leave me alone? I asked. A while, she said. Then not. That's how this goes. And you? She looked at her hands, at the flour ground into the lines, at the thin scars around her wrists where rope or wire or duty had once been. I stay, she said, until I can't. Then someone else knocks, and I open the door and say they're late, and I teach them to say thank you. That's it? It's enough, she said. On the drive home, the detour looked like a perfectly ordinary road. The oak's broken heart showed darker against the sky. The farmhouse windows, upstairs and down, were dark, but I would have sworn there was the faintest glow in the nearly invisible door at the end of the hall, the kind of light you see only when you've trained your eye to admit that houses are not just walls. At my apartment, the threshold was clean, no flour. The glass over the sink was dry inside. Someone had left a heel of bread on my counter wrapped in brown paper. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and rosemary. A note was tucked beneath the string that tied it, in careful block letters the way people write when they want the words to hold you up. You are doing beautifully. Keep going. I ate the heel standing up because it felt right to refuse a chair. I slept without knocks. In the morning I swept anyway. Sometimes in the week after, I'd be crossing my living room and feel my foot find a stair that wasn't there. The house on the detour making a small claim across town. Sometimes my name would arrive in the room with me, already spoken, waiting to hear if I'd answer. Thank you, I'd say, like a person saying grace with no one to thank. It got quieter. It will not stay quiet. Old things never do. But I have bread and salt and a ledger of sentences to braid into nets, and the knowledge that a door that stands invisible at the end of a hall can still be told no. And when the wind threads the alley just right outside my building and the apartment leans toward me, the way houses do when they've learned a new name, I hear a voice from a kitchen with a stove door that squeaks and a woman who keeps her sleeves rolled up and a house that is trying, in its old hungry way, to learn its manners. And I answer like this, careful and steady, the way you answer when you plan to keep sleeping in your own bed. Thank you. Now, on to the next story. The road into the mountains had been empty for hours. No headlights in the rear view, no taillights ahead, just switchbacks climbing higher and higher, pines leaning across the road as if to hide it from the rest of the world. My phone had been dead for a while. No service this far out, not even the promise of a bar if I held it up to the windshield. By the time the rain started, I was too tired to care. The wipers worked hard against it, beating the glass with a rhythm that matched the knots in my shoulders. I told myself another 30 miles, maybe 40, and I'd hit a town, somewhere with a gas station still open, a cheap motel with humming air units in the window, the smell of bleach in the sheets. But when the sign appeared on the right side of the road, it looked old enough that I doubted it even belonged anymore. Mountain View Lodge, it said in white paint that had dulled to bone. The arrow pointed down a gravel road that sloped into the trees. Beneath, a smaller sign read, "Vacancy, hot coffee, all night." I slowed. My gas tank was flirting with empty, the warning light a steady reminder. The idea of curling into the back seat at some trailhead parking lot wasn't appealing. A lodge, even a forgotten one, was better than nothing. The gravel road was longer than I expected, winding through dark pines until I thought maybe I'd taken the wrong turn. But then the trees broke, and there it was, a low building with a peaked roof, neon buzzing faintly in the rain. The sign over the entrance still said Mountain View Lodge, though one of the letters stuttered like it couldn't keep up. The parking lot was half full, a few trucks with out-of-state plates, a sedan, something that might once have been a camper van. The lights glowed warm in the windows, and steam rose from a vent at the side of the building, carrying the smell of food that was better than it had any right to be out here. I parked near the door and killed the engine. For a second I just sat there, listening to the rain tick against the roof, the silence of the mountains pressing close. Then I grabbed my bag and made a run for it. The lobby was warmer than expected. Too warm, almost, like a house with the heat turned up against a deep winter. The carpet smelled faintly of pine cleaner. A couch sagged against one wall, a lamp throwing yellow light across a stack of travel magazines, so old the covers had curled. Behind the desk sat a man in a burgundy vest. He looked up as I entered, smiled in a way that felt practiced but not unfriendly. His hair was neatly parted, his hands folded as if he'd been waiting. "Evening," he said. "Welcome to Mountain View Lodge. Rough night to be driving." "Yeah," I said, shaking rain from my jacket. "Didn't know there was anything out here. I'm glad I found you." "That's what we're here for," he said smoothly. "A place for the road to let go. We've always got a room and always hot coffee." He gestured toward the corner where a glass pot sat full on a warmer. Steam curled from its spout. "How much for a night?" He waved a hand as if cost was a minor detail. 45, he said. "Cash or card. Continental breakfast in the morning. Checkouts whenever you're ready." That last part made me pause. Whenever. "We don't rush people here," he said. "The road can wait. The mountain has time." I handed him my card. He slid a small brass key across the counter, the kind with a heavy fob that said Room 6. "Straight down the hall," he said. "You'll find it." The hallway smelled faintly of smoke, not cigarettes, not fire, but something older, the ghost of wood burning long ago. The carpet was worn in the middle, soft with the memory of 1,000 footsteps. My room was at the far end. Inside, it was cleaner than I expected. Bedspread patterned with faded leaves, a small desk, a lamp with a crooked shade. The bathroom door stood open, showing a spotless sink and a shower curtain with a design of pine cones. Nothing fancy, but nothing rotten either. I dropped my bag, sat on the edge of the bed, and let my shoulders relax. For the first time all day, I felt like I'd landed somewhere I could stop moving. The knock came a few minutes later, not loud, just a polite rap, like someone testing if I was awake. I opened the door. A woman stood there, middle-aged, carrying a tray with a steaming bowl on it. She wore a faded uniform, the kind of thing a motel maid might wear decades ago. Her face was kind but tired, her eyes searching mine like she'd been waiting for me. "Thought you might want something warm," she said, holding the tray out. I blinked. I didn't order anything. "No charge," she said. "It's what we do. Everyone gets soup their first night. Helps you rest." The bowl smelled incredible. Chicken and herbs, steam rising in comforting waves. My stomach growled. "Thanks," I said, taking it. She smiled faintly, then walked back down the hall without another word. I shut the door, sat at the desk, and ate. The soup was good, too good for a place like this. The kind of flavor that made you feel like you'd been starving without knowing it. By the time I finished, my eyelids were heavy. I lay down just to rest. Sleep took me faster than I expected, and that's when the dreams began. I was walking down the motel hallway, but it was longer than before, the doors repeating endlessly. Room 6, room 7, room 8, then again, room 6, room 7, room 8. The carpet stretched like a throat. I heard footsteps ahead but could never catch up. When I turned around, the desk clerk was standing at the far end, hands folded, smiling. The woman with the soup stood beside him, her face blurred by distance but her eyes sharp and waiting. Behind them, the lobby was too bright, the kind of light that makes you squint but doesn't let you see. I woke with the taste of salt in my mouth, like the soup had followed me into sleep. The room was dark, the lamp off. I didn't remember turning it out. For a moment, I thought I saw someone sitting in the chair by the desk, a shape darker than the dark around it. But when I blinked, the chair was empty. The only sound was the hum of the vent, steady, patient, as if the building was breathing. Morning came gray, the kind of light that makes you wonder if the sun ever really rises this high in the mountains. The curtains in room 6 didn't block much, but the world beyond them seemed muted anyway, as if the lodge stood in a pocket of weather, separate from everything else. I sat up, rubbing the sleep from my face. My mouth was dry, my tongue heavy. On the desk, the bowl from the night before was gone. No tray, no spoon, not even a ring of broth, just the clean surface, wiped as if no meal had ever sat there. I hadn't dreamed that, I thought. I could still taste the herbs, still feel the warmth in my chest, but the evidence had vanished. The shower ran hot, steam curling from the curtain in generous waves. Too generous, I realized. The mirror didn't fog at all, no matter how long the water poured. I wiped a hand across it and found the glass perfectly clear. My reflection looked pale, my eyes ringed with a sleepless edge. Down in the lobby, the smell of coffee hit me like an embrace. The pot was fresh, the burner humming. A tray of muffins sat on the counter. Blueberry, bran, cinnamon. They looked homemade, not bought from a supply truck. I poured a cup and sat on the sagging couch. A man sat across from me, slouched in one of the armchairs. He wore a flannel shirt, buttoned to the throat, his jeans worn pale at the knees. His boots were muddy, though I hadn't seen any mud on the road in. He glanced at me once, then back at the magazine in his lap. It was a copy of National Geographic from 1989, the cover frayed at the edges. "You just passing through?" he asked, not looking up. "Yeah," I said, "heading east. Roads got long last night." He nodded slowly, as if that answer was something he'd been expecting. That's how most find it. Tired, road folding in on itself, eyes looking for light. Lodge has a way of catching that. "You stay here often?" Another slow nod. "Long enough." He turned a page without really looking at it. "You'll see. Food's good. Beds are soft. Mountain air does something for the bones. Place makes you want to linger." The way he said linger made my stomach tighten. Before I could reply, the clerk in the burgundy vest appeared behind the desk. He looked as fresh as last night, not a hair out of place, smile smooth as though it had been pressed there. "Sleep well?" he asked me. "Yeah." I said automatically, though my dreams argued otherwise. That's good. Folks find the first night here restful, helps them decide to stay a little longer. He leaned an elbow on the counter, tilting his head. How many nights should I put you down for? I'm leaving today, I said. The flannel man chuckled softly in his chair. The clerk's smile didn't falter, but his eyes flickered the way people's eyes do when they've heard something they don't prefer. Of course, he said, whenever you're ready. I left the coffee half finished, grabbed my bag from room 6, and headed for the lot, but my car wouldn't start. The engine turned once, twice, then coughed out. I tried again, pumping the gas, but it was no use. The rain had stopped, the sky pale and flat, but the lot felt smaller than it had the night before, as if the trees had crept closer during the night. I popped the hood and stared at the engine like I'd know what to do. I didn't. My skills ended at topping off washer fluid. Need a hand? The voice came from behind me. The man in flannel stood a few feet away, hands shoved in his pockets. His boots left no prints on the wet gravel. Yeah, I said reluctantly. Won't turn over. He peered into the hood, nodding as though diagnosing something he'd seen 1,000 times. Battery's fine. Lines are fine. Sometimes it just takes a rest. Cars don't like this air right away. Give it a few hours. Try again after breakfast. I already had coffee, I said. Not the same, he answered. You should eat. That's what the place wants. I didn't like the way he phrased it, but standing there with the useless car, bag slung over my shoulder, I realized I had no real choice. Inside, the dining room sat just off the lobby. A handful of guests filled the tables. An older couple in matching sweaters. A young woman in a leather jacket scrolling her phone with a look of growing frustration. 2 men in work clothes eating silently side by side. The room buzzed with the low murmur of voices, the scrape of cutlery. I took a seat near the window. The view showed nothing but trees, dark and close. A waitress appeared, the same woman who'd brought me soup the night before. Today her uniform was cleaner, but her eyes still carried that tired kindness. What'll it be? She asked. Menu? I said. She shook her head, smiling faintly. No menu, we make what's needed. Today it's eggs and sausage, toast with blackberry jam. Coffee or tea? Coffee, I said. Of course. She wrote nothing down, but returned minutes later with a steaming plate. Eggs cooked perfectly, jam glistening dark on thick slices of bread. I ate because there was nothing else to do. The flavor was rich, grounding, the kind of meal that makes you forget fast food ever existed. Around me, the other guests ate with the same quiet focus. No chatter, no complaints. Just chewing, swallowing, nodding faintly, as if the food confirmed something they already knew. When I finished, the waitress took my plate without asking if I wanted more. Try the car again after lunch, she said softly, and walked away. I froze. I said breakfast. I muttered under my breath, but she was already gone. Back in room 6, the bed was made, my bag neatly placed on the chair. I hadn't asked for housekeeping. My phone sat on the desk where I'd left it, but when I picked it up, the screen flickered with a single bar of service. One new message blinked across the screen. Stay. No number, no sender, just the word. I dropped the phone on the bed, my pulse sharp in my throat. The vent hummed steadily overhead. Louder now, a sound too rhythmic to be machinery, more like breathing. I left the room and walked the hall, looking for an exit at the far end. The corridor stretched longer than it had before, doors repeating in an uncanny rhythm. Room 6, room 7, room 8, then again, room 6. My stomach knotted. I turned back, forcing myself not to look at the numbers anymore. The lobby was quiet when I returned. The flannel man was gone. The clerk behind the counter smiled at me, as though I'd just walked in for the first time. Everything to your liking? He asked. I want to leave, I said flatly. He tilted his head, smile never breaking. Of course, you can check out whenever you're ready. I wanted to slam my hand on the desk, demand my key deposit, demand a tow truck, something, but the warmth of the lobby pressed on me, too heavy, and the clerk's smile was so unshakably polite, It felt absurd to argue. Instead, I turned on my heel and went back outside. The cars in the lot were the same as before. Same trucks, same sedan, same camper van. I looked at the plates again, dusty, faded, some with stickers years out of date. One still wore a temporary tag that had bleached nearly white in the sun. No one left. Maybe no one ever had. I climbed into my car again, just to prove something, and turned the key. The engine coughed once and died. The gas gauge needle hovered just above empty, and in the reflection of the rearview mirror, for a split second, I thought I saw someone sitting in the back seat. I spun in the seat, heart pounding, but the back was empty. Just my duffel bag, my jacket balled on top of it. No shadow, no figure, yet the air still felt pressed down, like someone had just leaned close and whispered in my ear. I slammed the door and climbed out, breath clouding though the morning wasn't cold enough for it. The trees around the lot leaned inward, black-green against the pale sky. No sound of birds, no hum of insects, just the steady drip of water from the roof and the faint buzzing of the neon vacancy sign. The thought struck me then. I hadn't seen anyone leave the dining room. The guests I'd noticed earlier, the old couple, the young woman with her phone, the men in work clothes, hadn't come or gone. They'd just been there like furniture. I walked back inside, needing answers more than I needed dignity. The lobby was empty except for the clerk. He stood exactly as before, hands folded neatly, smile like it had been painted on. "There's something wrong with my car," I said. "I need a tow truck. Can you call one?" "Of course," he said smoothly, "but the lines have been down. Storms up here like to take them out. Service should be back soon. I'll call with my cell." "You won't get much signal," he said. "I'll walk until I do," I snapped. The smile wavered for the first time. Not gone, but twitching, as if holding its place required effort. "The mountain doesn't like people walking too far alone. Safer to stay inside." "I'll risk it." I turned, but as I reached the door, the flannel man stepped in from outside. Rain dripped from his shoulders, though the sky beyond him was dry. He looked at me with steady eyes, the kind that measured, weighed, and always found you wanting. "Car trouble?" he asked mildly. "Yes," I said. "I'm leaving." "Not yet. You're not." He brushed past me, leaving the faint smell of wet pine. To the clerk, he said, "Room 6 settled in?" "Getting there," the clerk replied. I froze. "What do you mean, settled in?" Neither of them answered. I didn't go back to room 6. Instead, I walked the hall, past the repeating numbers, ignoring the twist in my stomach when the doors didn't match the turns I'd taken. I stopped at room 10. My hand hesitated on the knob, then turned, unlocked. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the weight of years. The bed was neatly made, but the spread was old, patterned with orange and brown swirls that belonged to another decade. A suitcase sat on the floor, leather cracked, tag still attached. The name was smudged with time, unreadable. I opened it. Clothes folded neatly, yellowed at the edges, a watch tucked into a sock, a book of matches from Mountain View Lodge, 6 still unused. On the nightstand sat a half-finished glass of water. Dust coated the rim. The bathroom smelled faintly of mildew. A bar of soap lay on the sink, worn thin. In the mirror, for the briefest moment, I thought I saw someone standing behind me. A man, hair slicked back, suit too tight, but when I spun, the room was empty. I left quickly, heart hammering, and closed the door, harder than I meant to. Back in the hallway, the air felt closer, as if the building had been holding its breath while I trespassed. I needed to see if anyone here was real. The dining room was quieter now. The old couple sat at their table, unmoving, plates empty. Their hands were folded together on the wood, knuckles pale. Their eyes tracked me when I entered, but they didn't blink. The young woman with the phone was still scrolling, but the screen was black. Her finger moved in endless motions across glass that showed nothing. The two men in work clothes sat with their heads bowed, as if in prayer. Their forks rose, fell, but no food sat on their plates. I backed out slowly, stomach twisting. In the lobby, the coffee pot steamed. The muffins on the tray looked exactly as they had before, fresh, untouched, perfect. The clerk was gone. The flannel man was gone. I stood alone in the too warm air, the silence stretching until it felt like the building itself was listening. A sound broke it, the faint creak of footsteps above. The second floor. I hadn't noticed stairs before, but now they waited at the end of the hall, carpeted in the same faded pattern. I climbed, each step groaning as though unhappy to be disturbed. The hall upstairs was narrower, the doors closer together. Numbers stuttered: 11, 12, 12, 13, 12. My throat tightened. At the far end, one door stood ajar. Light spilled through the crack, pale and unsteady. I pushed it open. The room inside was bare. No bed, no furniture, just walls lined with photographs, hundreds of them, overlapping, covering every surface. People stared out of them: men, women, children, some black and white, some color, some Polaroids with fading ink. Strangers, all of them. Their eyes seemed to follow. In the center of the room, a table held a single photo in a frame. The glass was cracked, the image beneath worn but still visible. It was me. I staggered back, breath locked in my chest. The photo showed me standing in the motel lobby, bag slung over my shoulder, eyes tired but hopeful. From last night, the door slammed behind me. I spun and threw my shoulder into the door. It didn't budge. The photographs rustled without wind, a whisper of paper against plaster like 1,000 throats clearing at once. I pressed my back to the wood and stared at my own face on the table. The frame was old, but the image was new. The crack across the glass split my eye, and for an instant I had the nauseous sense that the pain in the picture might be able to reach through. I lifted the frame with both hands. The glass was warm. Behind my photo lay another, then another beneath that. I slid mine aside. The next was a woman in a yellow raincoat, hair plastered to her cheeks. The lobby behind her exactly as I knew it. Under hers, a man in a suit too tight for his shoulders, hair slicked back, expression trying to be brave. I kept going, Polaroids curling with age, matte prints, glossy prints, children, couples, a woman pregnant and smiling in a way that made my stomach ache because the smile didn't belong here. The stack got heavier. How many pictures could a place keep before it had to decide it was a museum? The wall photographs overlapped so densely that faces merged. An eye from this stranger, a mouth from that one, until the wallpaper's pattern showed through only in thin seams like scars. I slid the whole stack back together and set my own photo on top again. Maybe it was a foolish magic, the kind of thing that makes you feel like you've put something back into its right place when you haven't. It steadied me anyway. I put my ear to the door. Silence. Then the sound of steps in the hall. A measured tread that stopped just on the other side. The knob did not turn. The presence waited, like a person with good manners who still intends to sell you something you can't afford. You can check out whenever you're ready, came the clerk's voice through the wood, softened by inches and echo. No rush. Open the door, I said. Please. The pause held a smile in it. You can open it. You're already inside. The photographs behind me made the dry susurrus again, a tide of paper. I stepped away from the door and turned once around the empty room, because the body sometimes demands movement as proof the world hasn't stopped. Above the table, a ceiling light flickered. Not failing, just thinking about it. I looked up. A small square of wood sat flush with the ceiling, the kind of access panel maintenance uses to get into guts and rafters. No handle, no hinges, just seams. I dragged the table under it, careful not to knock over any frames. The legs squealed against scuffed floor. When I climbed up, the table wobbled like it hadn't been asked to hold weight in years. I reached up and pressed the square. At first nothing, then it rose grudgingly. Warm air breathed down, and with it the smell of dust that had been balancing itself perfectly until I ruined it. I shoved the panel aside, gripped the edge, and hauled myself into the dark. The space above the ceiling wasn't a proper attic. It was the negative of the rooms below, beams and wires, and the undersides of floors. My phone light made a tunnel of sight that ended too soon. The warmth up there was the kind that lives in old buildings, heat stored in wood, not from a furnace. The sound of the lodge came different through the joists. The vents hummed not like breathing now, but like a vowel someone held without releasing. I crawled, the table a small wobble beneath me until I cleared it. My knees found narrow boards between insulation and nothing. I moved toward where I thought the hallway should be, then toward a square of shadow that might have been another panel. Behind me, the door I had left would still be shut. Maybe the clerk waited. Maybe he didn't need to. The panel I found opened easier. I pushed, and it lifted into an empty space. I eased it aside, lowered my head. The room beneath was unfamiliar, and also exactly familiar. The same spread, the same lamp, the same pinecone curtain. Room 6. I had climbed a circle. The hair rose on my arms as if the air had slipped snow under it. I lay with my ribs pressed to the beam, and had the sudden furious thought that if the building wanted to play tricks, I could play stubbornness. I backed away from the opening, turned, crawled the other direction. The wood breathed with me. I found another panel, another. Each time I pressed up and peered down, the lodge offered me a different version of itself. Room 4, a bathroom with a clawfoot tub ringed by soap, a hallway that stuttered its numbers like a stammerer being corrected by someone cruel. Then the photograph room again, the frames shining up at me like a wet field of eyes. The building wasn't a shape you could map. It was a will laid out as walls. I couldn't outcrawl that. I eased the panel back into place above the photograph room and lay flat in the warm dark until my breath stopped trying to sound like running. Then I crawled toward the end where the roof should be and found miraculously ordinary, a square hole of attic vent that looked out on trees. It was screened in, fastened with screws eaten soft by weather. I laughed, a small cracked sound that felt like blasphemy or prayer. I pulled off a shoe, used the heel to worry one screw, and then another, until the screen sagged. The air that came through was cold, clean, indifferent. The mountain didn't care who I thought I was. It didn't care if a lodge used it like a lie. I pushed the screen outward and peered down. The drop was too far for a human body to attempt without breaking itself. The roof sloped slick with rain that had dried to a treachery. Below, the gravel of the lot glinted like fish scales. My car waited. The neon sign buzzed vacancy, vacancy, vacancy. I pressed my forehead to the frame of the vent and allowed myself the small, mean hope that the lodge might not expect this exit. Then I remembered the photographs, the stack of them, the ledger of faces, all the attempts the building had witnessed. It had time. It had seen worse. It would have answers. The vent breathed a small, cold warning into my hair. I backed away. I returned to the panel over room 6, slid it aside again, and climbed down onto the wobbling table. My room looked unchanged. Bag on the chair, lamp polite in its crookedness, but the air bore the slight sweetness of breath, held, and then let go. The bedspread had gained one wrinkle that wasn't mine. On the desk sat a cup of coffee that had not been there. Steam still rose. I approached it as if it were a thing that could watch me. The surface was perfectly still, a dark lens. I bent, and in it saw my own eye, tiny, warped. Behind that reflection moved something like a corridor seen through a keyhole, long, repeating, the hint of a figure turning the far corner just out of sight. I put my hand around the cup and felt heat that had learned the shape of hands, not mine, many. I picked it up and walked to the sink and poured it out. The coffee made no sound when it struck the porcelain. For a moment the surface didn't ripple at all. Then it unmade itself into dark threads that crawled back toward the drain and vanished. No stain. I left the cup upside down. It wobbled unhappily and then agreed to be still. The urge to flee returned so purely it made my knees try to run without me. I grabbed my bag and went to the door. It opened easily, but the hall beyond had shifted into that long throat I knew from the dream. Room 6 repeated down one side, room 7 down the other, the carpet's patterns stitching the distance together like a seam that never ends. The light was even, shadowless, the kind that makes time forget to happen. I stepped out anyway, because staying was a kind of agreement I refused to give. I walked. The numbers did not change. The doors did not vary. The air had the smell of old wood and a sweetness like something baked, like a memory you're proud of because you survived it. I kept walking until the decent part of me that wanted to obey signs started to feel stupid. No, I said aloud, quietly, but with the particular violence of someone who has decided to be rude to save their life. I turned and walked the other way. The hall did not approve. The carpet seemed to tug under my feet, a softness that argued. I kept my pace steady, the way you walk away from a conversation you're done having. The clerk waited at the far end, hands folded, smile perfect. He had not been there a moment before. Now he was the kind of there that explains itself. "We don't rush people," he said, as if sorrowed by my lack of faith. "You can check out whenever you're ready." "I'm ready. You've only just arrived," he said, and the politeness in it came with teeth. "You haven't had lunch." "I'm not hungry. There's stew today." "No." He tilted his head, and the smile warmed by a degree that made the room colder. "You'll feel better with something warm. Your soup made me sleep. Rest is our specialty," he said mildly. "The road is cruel. We are kind." "What is this place?" I asked, because sometimes a question buys you the breath you need to run. He opened his hands in a gesture that was meant to be generous, but came out rehearsed. "A place between roads, a pause, an answer to a need you didn't know how to ask. We've been here a long time. We'll be here when the other roads forget where they were going. And the people who stay? People stay because they're tired. And when they're not, we help," he said. "We keep them from making trouble for themselves. We keep them fed. We give them back their faces." I thought of the room of photographs. "You take their faces. Borrow," he said. "Everyone leaves something. A sweater, a book, a picture. It's polite to leave a piece of yourself in a place that held you. And the ones who don't go?" The smile remained, but the eyes behind it looked for a second like old glass, thin, wavy, too delicate to bear the weight it had been asked to. "Sometimes the road isn't there anymore," he said. "Sometimes this is safer." "For who?" "For everyone." The flannel man appeared beside him, as if summoned by the word everyone. His boots left no mud. He regarded me with the calm of a mechanic who has already decided what to charge. "You'll stay," he said, not unkindly. "You might not like it at first. You'll get used to it." I thought of the woman in the leather jacket scrolling a dead screen, the men in work clothes eating with empty forks, the old couple holding hands with knuckles so white they might have been praying their fingers not to go anywhere alone. No, the flannel man sighed like someone who had been proud of being right and hated being corrected. "It'll be worse if you argue." "Then show me the door," I said. The clerk's smile broadened to show a tiny bit of tooth. "We already did." Behind them, the lobby yawned out. Muffins, coffee, the sagging couch. The glass entrance door stood wide, the mountain day pale beyond. It was so simple a trap I almost laughed. "That one," I said, "leads back in." "It leads where you need to go," the clerk said. "That's our promise." "Promises made with your hand on your own throat aren't promises," I said, surprising myself with the heat in it. The smile faltered again. The thin glass wavered. The flannel man's face did not move, but I saw something given his posture, a small shift as if he were lining up a shot from long range, and the wind had changed. "You can't outwalk us," he said. "You can't outwant us." "I can be impolite," I said. "I can refuse." I stepped toward them. They did not move aside. The space narrowed in the way hallways do in dreams. I stopped a pace away and put my hand out. The clerk did too. For a second, the strangest impulse came over me, to shake his hand, to make this civil, to accept the bargain as between equals. I closed my fingers and knocked 3 times on the desk instead. Flat palm, steady, not loud, just enough to set the wood to remembering it was wood. The clerk's eyes flicked to my hand. The flannel man's head tilted, puzzled. "Numbers matter," I said softly, and did it again. 3. The lodge around us, which had been holding its breath in that long hotel way, exhaled. A draft of air moved along the floor from nowhere in particular to nowhere else. The coffee pot let out a tiny sound, as if it had been reminded of an older duty. The neon sign hiccuped in the corner of my eye. The clerk looked irritated for the first time. "We don't do parlor games," he said. "We do hospitality." "Then be hospitable," I said. "Open a door you don't like." "Which door is that?" "The one you keep behind the photographs," I said. His gaze flicked just once toward the ceiling. The glass in his eyes thinned another dangerous degree. "Guests don't go upstairs," he said. "Then you can escort me." "We'd lose you." "You never lose anyone," I said. "Isn't that the point?" The flannel man's jaw moved like he was chewing on a decision he knew he had already made. "Fine," he said, briefly. He walked past me. I felt the air flex around his shoulders. The clerk didn't follow. I did. We climbed the stairs at the end of the hall. The lodge led us, although the steps took longer to be steps than I liked. The door of photographs stood open now, the frames their own tide. The flannel man did not look at the walls. He crossed the empty floor, reached up, and pressed the ceiling panel I had already found. It rose. Warm air breathed. "There," he said. "Satisfied?" "No," I said, and slid the table across the floor with the same squeal I had made before. "Go on," he said. "Try your vent." "You know about it," I said. "We've seen it all," he answered, which would have been comforting if I had been a different person, in a different building, with a different idea of mercy. "You climb, you drop, you break something you need for walking. We carry you back down and set you in room 6 with your soup and your bread. You sleep, you wake quieter. We're not cruel. Cruelty is convenience," I said, and surprised myself by sounding like someone I would have liked to know. "Let me see the other door." "There isn't one," he said, alas, with perfect honesty. "There's only our way, which is down and in. Then there's my way," I said. I stepped onto the table and hauled myself into the warm dark. The flannel man didn't stop me. I crawled to the vent, put my face to the cold, and considered breaking myself for a kind of freedom I couldn't use. Behind me, the lodge hummed. It wasn't angry. It was patient. Patience is a shape of hunger here. I backed away from the vent, returned to the panel over room 6, and eased it open again. Below, the lamp waited like a small prayer. "You'll come down," the flannel man said mildly. "You'll be glad you did." "Maybe," I said. "Not today." I slid the panel back into place and crawled again to the photograph room and pressed my ear to the wood and listened. Through joists and plaster, I could hear the lobby, the coffee pot, the neon, the clerk's voice not saying words, just making the shape of them, and beneath that, something else, something that sounded like page after page, turned slowly by careful fingers. I went back to the first panel, lifted it, lowered myself into room 6, and took my bag. I didn't go to the door. I went to the window. It didn't open at first. The catch refused with the obstinacy of old paint and well-meant imprisonment. I slid the blade of my room key into the seam and levered, thinking of all the strangers who had slept here and accepted mornings like trains that arrive on time. The catch surrendered. The window rose a grudging inch, then two. Cold air knifed in, as clean as judgment. I lifted higher until the gap would take a body. The drop was only one floor. The bushes below were not forgiving, but they were alive. I swung a leg over, then the other, and sat on the sill with my hands blistering on the wood. Behind me, the room's vent raised its hum like a voice that has noticed a wrong note. You don't like people who finish their own sentences, do you? I said to the room, to the lodge, to the clerk and the flannel man, and the kindly waitress, and the shapes that ate with empty forks. You don't like people who say no and keep walking. The room did not answer. I looked down once, the way you have to, and then I let go. The bushes made a sound like a crowd trying to clap quietly. Twigs grabbed at my jacket, offered scratches as souvenirs. I landed badly and felt something in my ankle complain. Pain is honest. I thanked it for not being worse. I staggered up, bag on my shoulder, and ran. The lot felt longer across than it had ever looked from the window. The lodge behind me did not shout. It didn't need to. The neon beat vacancy, vacancy, vacancy. The trees leaned in to see whether I would make a fool of myself by believing in roads. My car unlocked at the first press. I threw myself inside and turned the key. The engine turned. Once, twice, then caught. Irregular at first, then smoothing, as if remembering the point of pistons. Good, I said aloud to the machine, to myself, to the part of the mountain that wasn't hungry. Good. I slammed it into reverse. In the rearview mirror, the lobby door stood open. The clerk watched me go. The smile was gone. His face looked empty without it, as if he didn't have the muscles for anything else. The flannel man stood beside him, hands in his pockets, approving of nothing. I didn't look again. I threw the car into drive and took the gravel hard enough to fishtail, then found the road, then found the curve that would have been the wrong curve if the lodge had been allowed to decide for me. The mountain didn't offer me service bars. It didn't offer me comfort. It offered me distance, which was all I wanted. The light became less pale. The trees stopped leaning. The road stopped trying to be a hallway. I drove until my gaslight scalded my eyes, and then farther, because sometimes you need to prove to yourself you can run on more than fumes. A town appeared. 2 streets, 1 stoplight, a gas station with a bored teenager behind bulletproof glass, and a rack of mints by the register. I bought gas. I bought water. I bought the mints because I had learned, in a different place under a different sign, that sweets tell the road you remember your tongue. The teenager asked if I needed a receipt. I said no. My hands shook only a little when I drank the water. I did not look back. In my apartment days later, laundry piled, dishes obeying the rules of physics again. I woke in the night with my name in my ear, not from a voice beside the bed, from the hot breath of a vent. I lay on my back and counted 3 steady knocks on the wall, with the flat part of my palm, not enough to wake the neighbors, enough to tell the world I wasn't done answering for myself. The vent sighed. In the morning, there was a photograph pushed under my door, a cheap print on thin paper, ink a little smeared, as if the machine had forgotten to calibrate. The image was the lobby, the sagging couch, the muffins that never went stale. In the frame's reflection, a figure stood where I must have been standing last night, in my dream of being there again. The figure was slightly turned, ready to go, and the door stood open on a day the mountain had not yet decided to have. Someone had written, in careful block letters along the bottom margin, "You can check out whenever you're ready." Beneath that, in a hand I did not recognize and also knew, smaller, "You already did." I burned the photograph over the sink. The paper curled, blackened, gave off a sweetness like bread. The smoke alarm did not go off. I opened the window. Air came in that smelled like my city, hot concrete, and someone else's dinner, and a bus that needs a new belt. At the bottom of the trash bag, under coffee grounds and an apple core, a room key thunked against the plastic. Brass fob. Room 6, I did not pick it up. I tied the bag and took it straight outside to the cans and dropped it in and listened until the thunk disappeared into other noises. I walked around the block in my slippers, stupid and alive. A stranger's dog dragged its person past and decided it loved me for exactly 2 seconds with the fervor of an animal who has not been taught to be careful about joy. I let it. On the corner, a cafe put out a plate of day-old pastries. I took one and ate it in 3 bites and did not think of soup. The mountain will keep its lodge. It will set out coffee. It will watch the road for the soft lights of cars that think they have found something kind. The clerk will smooth his hair. The flannel man will stand with his hands in his pockets and pretend to be inevitable. They will be right about most people. The hall will stretch when asked. The photographs will take on new faces and grow older as ink does. The trick, if there is one, is not courage. It is rudeness used like a tool. It is refusal practiced until it sounds like grace. It is 3 knocks and not looking back, and a car that starts when you ask it to because you remembered to learn how to say no. When the wind threads my building just right, and the vent warms like a throat preparing to speak, I answer first, steady and small, I'm busy, and the house that is not a lodge, and the road that is a road, and the mountain that is far away, all agree to let me be, for now, which is all the checkout anyone ever gets. Now, on to the next story. The first wrong thing about the town was how it appeared only when I stopped looking for it. I had been driving long enough for the lines on the highway to turn into a lullaby that wanted my eyelids more than it wanted my wheels. The GPS had given up 15 miles back, the screen doing that embarrassed shimmer before blanking to a single sentence, rerouting, and then pretending it had never promised to know where we were. I told myself I'd stop at the next exit, any exit, even if it was just a gas station lit up like a spaceship that had decided to learn about beef jerky. The road gave me nothing until it gave me everything. An off-ramp that had no sign, a curve that felt like the road had reached out and taken my wrist, and then a 2-lane street lined with maples that should have been green but were already turning, each leaf a flame that hadn't told the branch yet. The town sat low and polite in the belly of a small valley, the hills around it hunching their shoulders as if to keep the wind from being rude. A metal arch over the road said welcome in letters that had been painted sometime between World War II and the invention of good taste. No name beneath, no founding date, no population sign, just the word you say when you own your front porch and your neighbor's opinion about it. I slowed without deciding. An old-fashioned gas station stood on the corner, pumps squat and fat, numbers clicking behind glass, as if someone had taught the air arithmetic. Across from it, a diner with a chrome edge that caught the late afternoon light and threw it back as a challenge. Farther down the main street, a hardware store with a bell on the door, a barber pole that actually turned, a storefront full of dresses, too careful to be worn on a Wednesday. People moved through it all like this had always been here, like they had been practicing this exact afternoon for years. The second wrong thing was the clock over the diner door, big round with numbers thick enough to see from the street, hands black as a decision. It said 4:17 when I pulled up outside the gas station. It said 4:17 after I cut the engine. It said 4:17 when I got out and stretched my back and heard my spine make the sound of dry kindling, remembering rain. A man stepped out from behind the station. He had a rag in his hand and a smile on his face, and the kind of posture that said both were habits, not personality. His coveralls were clean in the way coveralls never are if you've actually spent your day in them. The name stitched over his heart said Eli in threads slightly darker than the cloth, like a shadow had learned to sew. "Afternoon," he said. "Looks like the road found you tired." "That's about right," I said, because something in me had decided it would be a mistake to say I had found the town. "Any chance you can top me off and point me to a bathroom before I start making decisions I'll regret?" "We can do both," Eli said, and meant it, which made my neck loosen half an inch. He swung the hose toward my car with the grace of a man who has been pouring for decades. "Bathrooms in the diner. Tell June you're my guest." I nodded and crossed the street. The bell over the door gave a sound like a laugh someone meant to swallow. The place was almost indecently familiar. Booths the red of a child's idea of cherries. Counter stools shining like they'd been buffed with elbow grease and pride. Pie domes on the counter with slices arranged like they'd been taught geometry. A woman behind the counter looked up when I came in, and her face did a small loving thing I have only ever seen on people who have decided to be kind for a living. "You're just in time," she said. "We pull the coffee at 5, and the pies come out at 6. Bathrooms on the left." Eli said to say I'm his guest. I said because watching the way her eyes changed when I said his name felt like asking a building if it knew where it stood. Her smile warmed a fraction, as if the room had leaned closer to listen, and she wanted to make it comfortable. "He takes care of everyone," she said. "He'll take care of you." "It's only gas," I said. "Sometimes people need more and don't know how to say it," she answered, not unkind. "Go on. We've got time." The bathroom was clean enough to make me suspicious. Not a speck on the sink, paper towels folded like the corner of a bedsheet. When I turned the faucet on, the water ran warm immediately, as if the pipes had anticipated my hands and had been waiting with the temperature decided. The mirror above the sink gave me back a face I recognized but wouldn't have chosen, grayer at the edges than my last memory of myself. Eyes with the forward tilt of someone who keeps looking for the next exit, even while they're standing still. When I came back out, the diner's clock still said 4 set. Outside, the sky had changed by a shade you only notice when you've learned to keep time with your chest. The light fell softer, lower, as if the sun had remembered it had somewhere else to be. But the clock refused to be educated. "June," the woman said when I thanked her. "Pie later. Coffee now?" "I should settle up for gas," I said. "Then coffee, and maybe directions." She slid a mug toward me, and the steam that rose from it smelled like the memory of being taken care of. "We've got maps," she said, "but you'll find your way if you sit a bit first." I carried the coffee outside to where Eli was replacing the pump handle with the formal precision of ritual. The window of my car had partly fogged from the inside, though the afternoon wasn't cold enough for it. I wiped a circle with my sleeve without thinking, and half expected to see my own breath hanging in the air, like a speech bubble demanding to be filled. "Full up," Eli said. "No rush to pay. June will put it on a card. A card. Town card," he said, and I must have looked like a person who had just learned fruit have names because he added, "You don't need one. We keep track." I took out my wallet anyway. The bills felt like a promise I had made to myself. He put up a palm, patient. "If you stay for supper, you won't mind the math. If you don't, it won't matter." "What is this place?" I asked, because my mother taught me small talk is a bridge, but also sometimes the only weapon you get. "Home," he said simply. He said it the way a person points at a chair and names it to a child, not as argument, just as confirmation. "And if I'm not from here?" "You're here now," Eli said. Behind him, the maples let go of 2 leaves at the same moment. They drifted down like they had remembered gravity and wanted to apologize for it. I paid anyway and felt the money vanish in a way that made me wonder if it had ever been mine. I took my coffee and walked the length of the main street, because when you don't know what to do, your feet will decide to be more honest than your mouth. The town had all the pieces a place is supposed to have. A school with a playground out back, where a red swing twisted slowly without wind. A post office with a hand-lettered sign on the door that said out to lunch in blue letters that cared about their posture, a church whose steeple needed a tired man with a ladder and a new coat of paint. A dog watched me from a porch with the solemn attention of an animal that trusts but verifies. A boy rode by on a bike with baseball cards in the spokes, the slap, slap, slap of their approval trailing him down the block. He lifted a hand, and I lifted mine, and when our waves met in the air, neither of us looked surprised. The third wrong thing was the absence of past tense. The town felt like it had never been anything else. No buildings under new names, no renovations half begun and promising to be finished someday, no ghosts of failed cafes. Every shop window was a present moment that had never had to be anything else. At the end of the street, the pavement curled and offered me a choice, left toward a water tower with the town's name blank, where the name belongs, right toward a road that climbed gently and then disappeared into trees. I took the right because my legs have always believed in uphill the way some people believe in miracles. Halfway up the grade, a sign appeared on the right shoulder. It was not official, white paint on a plank, hammered into the ground by a hand that knew the pleasure of doing things carefully. It said pond with an arrow. Beneath it, smaller, good fishing. I don't fish, but I turned anyway because turning felt like admitting I might want to. The path wound through trees that had grown evenly spaced, as if they'd been told not to crowd. The smell of water met me before the water did, that clean wet that makes your mouth remember thirst, you already solved. The pond itself was a mirror laid into the earth with such gentleness the dirt hadn't protested. A dock sat on one side, wood gray with weather but not rot. A bench waited at the edge. A girl sat on it with her feet not reaching the ground, a sandwich in her lap. She looked up when I came near and considered me with the frankness only children and very old people allow themselves. "You're new," she said. "Today?" I said. "Maybe not tomorrow." "There's always a tomorrow," she answered, as if that solved the problem. "That depends on clocks." "Only if you like numbers," she said, and took a careful bite. "What's your name?" I asked, because the rule about not giving your name to strange places had not yet arrived to sit on my shoulder. She took so long to answer I thought she would refuse, then said Lena, and swallowed like the syllables had edges. "What's yours?" "Sam," I said, and the pond made a sound that might have been a frog, but felt like agreement. "You live here. Everyone lives here," she said. She swung her feet, toes pointing, shoes scuffed the way shoes get when their owner forgets to look where they're going. "Did you come for the festival?" "Festival?" "Tonight," she said, like I had missed a meeting. "We light the lanterns. They float." She lifted her hand and wiggled her fingers. "Like that." "For what?" "People who came and are still coming," she said. "For making wishes." "Do wishes work?" "Only the ones that know where to go." She finished her sandwich and set the crust on the bench, and 3 ducks arrived without visible travel to negotiate for it. "Eli says I should be home before supper to help June," she said, sliding off the bench. "If you get lost, you won't be. Someone will find you, even if it's you." She trotted up the path, then stopped and turned. "Don't go out on the dock after dark," she said. "It's polite in the daylight. And at night, it forgets it's wood," she said, cheerful as warnings go, and ran on. I sat until the coffee was cold, and even after that, until I couldn't pretend I was still drinking it. The water threw my face back at me with small edits. The trees on the far side of the pond listened the way good listeners do, with their whole bodies. When I got up, the air had thickened by some degree I couldn't measure. The walk back felt shorter, which is either comfort or trap depending on your mood. At the edge of the main street, the clock over the diner still said 4:17. I checked my phone out of habit and discovered that it had decided to have a signal again, but only for the time, 4:17 there too. The date looked right. The carrier name had been replaced by a single word, home. I I turned the phone off. There is only so much lying you can watch a little machine do before you feel complicit. Back at the gas station, Eli had produced a squeegee from somewhere and was making my windshield. Remember what glass is supposed to look like when you can see through it. Festival tonight, he said, not looking up. You should stay. June made soup. I was supposed to be somewhere, I said, and when the sentence reached my mouth, I realized I could not remember where. Not in the ways that mattered. Exits, turnoffs, that one idea of a diner with a pretzel logo 20 miles out. But in the way where a place stops calling you when you've stopped wanting to be called. We'll get you there, he said. No one's in a hurry. That's the only rule, and it's a kind one if you mean it. What if I don't? Eli wiped the squeegee on the rag and finally met my eyes, and for the first time, I saw something like mischief move across his face, like wind on a pond. Then you'll make trouble, he said, and we'll be polite about it. I took a room over the diner because the sign on the door said rooms, and because the idea of leaving felt like standing up in the middle of a song. June brought me a key threaded on a ribbon. The room had a bed with a quilt that looked like someone's grandmother had decided stars belonged on Earth. The window opened onto the side street and a view of the hardware store where a man was measuring twine with the focus of a surgeon. I put my bag down. It looked smaller here. I splashed water on my face and couldn't tell whether it was colder or my skin had learned to be warmer. When I went back downstairs, June set a bowl in front of me without asking. Chicken noodle, the kind that teaches your mouth to slow down. The spoon felt like a vote I could cast without consequences. You're in time, she said. Lanterns at dusk. Eli said not to hurry, I said. He tells everyone that. Is it true? It's true as long as you like it, she said. When it isn't true, it's still kinder to say it. People began to gather without the fuss that usually accompanies groups. Children carried paper bags with handles that looked like they had been cut by small hands with big scissors. Men in jackets too light for the evening shrugged them closer as if to keep their statements from escaping. An old woman with hair the color of a storm cloud held a bundle of thin sticks like arrows. June wiped the counter clean with a cloth that had known its shape for years, and then came around to stand next to me, her hand on my elbow, as if to make sure I didn't forget the relationship between bodies and gravity. Out back, she said. We'll walk to the pond together. Easier that way. The clock over the door said 4:17. The sky said otherwise, deepening by the breath into that blue the day gives, as a parting gift, so you will be grateful even when you're tired. We walked. The town moved as a single organism made out of smaller ones, each person an intention that had made friends with other intentions. Eli joined on my other side, the rag still in his pocket like a talisman. You'll make a wish? He asked. I'll think of one, I said. It's better if you say it aloud, June said. Otherwise the water makes up its own version. That seems dangerous. Only if you can't swim, she said. And for a moment I did not know if she had made a joke. The pond waited like it had been practicing all afternoon to pretend it had just been born. Someone had strung lights through the trees without making them look like decoration. The dock poked into the water with an innocence I did not trust. A table held paper lanterns with little metal ribs, squares that would box light, circles that would learn to be moons. June put one in my hands, and the thin paper told my palms it was softer than anything meant to hold fire. We light, and we let go, she said, and we don't take back. What if someone floats away? They do when they're ready, she said. Children ran along the shore until a voice that knew their names said their names, and they stopped with the obedience of bodies that have never yet had to argue with a clock. The girl from the bench, Lena, waved her arms to make more attention exist in her direction. We have a new one, she announced, pointing straight at me with the fairness of an arrow. He came at 4:17. A ripple of pleasure went through the crowd, the kind that says newness is welcome only because it means we were not wrong to wait. Eli raised his hand, and the sound settled without shushing. June gave me a lighter. Say it, she said. Then light it. Then let it go. My mouth opened, and my mind, traitor, went blank. I could have wished for anything, for rest, for money, for a map that didn't lie, for my mother to forgive me for that last conversation, when we both kept our pride like a small mean dog on a leash. What came out of my mouth surprised me because it did not surprise the pond. I want to remember where I was going, I said. Lena clapped once, delighted. Eli nodded as if I had passed a test I didn't know I was taking. June's hand pressed my elbow. Good, she said. Good. I lit the lantern. The flame took politely, then with more confidence, learning its paper house quickly. I carried it to the edge and placed it on the skin of the pond, the way you put ashore on a sleeping child. It drifted, then decided to move where all the others were moving, a small constellation, making a map that only the water could read. Around me, voices rose, small, private, sentences with edges that sometimes caught on breath, wishes about health, about forgiveness, about small stupid arguments that turned into the shape of rooms people don't like to be in. Someone said a name, and the water made the sound back like a hand smoothed over a wrinkled sheet. The lanterns drifted toward the middle and began to move in a slow spiral. I don't know if the pond did that, or if the air did, or if dozens of wishes made the water decide to be a clock after all. The sky had become full night. No stars. The town made its own. The lanterns brightened as if distance fed them. The people around me began to breathe like the day had run, and stopped, and was finally allowed to stand still and put its hands on its knees and laugh in relief. Behind my right shoulder, a voice very close and very gentle said, "Now you can stay." I turned, but there was no one pressed near enough to have spoken. Eli looked at me, unblinking. June watched the lights, her face the same soft gravity as the water. Lena was whispering something elaborate to her lantern, as if it had a pocket, and she was packing it a snack. The voice came again, not to my ear this time, but to the part of me that remembers who I said I'd be. "Now you can stay," it said, and this time I knew it was the town. I put my hands in my pockets and felt nothing but my hands. I said nothing because I didn't yet know which words were counted. The lanterns turned in their small circle, and somewhere a bell rang once, the kind of single note that means you'll be late for nothing if you don't hurry. Thank you for listening. If this story kept you company tonight, consider liking the video and subscribing for more myths, legends, and gentle hauntings. Sleep well, and may the trails you choose lead you safely home.